When I came home from prison, my husband unfolded a death certificate with my name, and my son whispered, "But Daddy said you died 10 months ago." Staring at the kid whose silly smile I could never misinterpret, I held my release papers near the door. "Leo baby, it's me. It's Mommy. I'm home." Leo turned pale like a ghost. "But Daddy said you died in prison." "What? That's crazy. I'm right here." He retreated into the house crying. "No, no, no. Mommy's dead. We went to her funeral. I put flowers on the wooden box she was in." "What box? What funeral?" I advanced, but Leo ran deeper into the house. "Daddy." When my husband Marcus spotted me in the hallway, his knees buckled. "Who are you?" Protectively he tucked Leo behind him. "Marcus, what are you talking about? It's me, Elena. I just got released from prison." I presented my release papers, but he didn't move. "Elena died 10 months ago," he sobbed. "Suicide in her cell. The warden called me himself and delivered the goodbye letter. I identified the body. We buried her. Weak legs. That's impossible. I wrote you letters every week. I called when I could. We talked about Leo's birthday a month ago." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I haven't gotten a letter or call in 10 months. Not since," he said. "Since my wife died. I don't know who you are or what kind of sick game this is, but you need to leave." "Game? Marcus. I'm your wife. We've been married for 13 years. He took a folder from the kitchen drawer. His hands were solid now, like he'd decided. My death certificate, prison letterhead stating I'd committed suicide, and funeral program with my photo were inside. "This is my wife's death certificate," he whispered. "Signed by the prison doctor." I regarded the documents. Official seals, signatures, everything looked legitimate. "This is fake. It has to be. Someone's lying to you." Looked around his father. "You smell like Mommy," he said. "Like her shampoo." Marcus persisted. He gently retracted Leo. "Buddy, I know you miss Mommy, but this isn't her. Sometimes bad people pretend to be someone we love." His protecting, mournful tone drove me insane. A blonde, possibly 30-year-old woman stepped from the hallway with her hand on a pregnant belly. She appeared 8 months pregnant. "Marcus, is everything okay?" She approached and touched his arm. "This woman says she's Elena," Marcus whispered. The blonde's eyes widened in amazement and sympathy. "Oh, honey." She extended her hand. "I'm so sorry, but after Marcus lost his wife, we met in a support group. I lost my husband too. I know how horrible grief can be." She faced Marcus. "Should I call the police? You married someone else?" I gasped when I saw her ring. "It's been 10 months, and you're already having a baby with someone else." I grieved. I moved forward for Leo. "Sophia has been wonderful with him." Hand squeezed by Sophia. "Leo, sweetie, why don't you go to your room while we handle this?" Leo glanced at me again. I was gaining his trust. "But she has Mommy's voice too." I gave him our pancake time smile. She smiled. Sophia bent to him. "I know, sweetie." Leo's eyes sparkled. He asked, "Can I go hug her?" "No, honey. Your Mommy is in heaven, remember? We visited her special place last week." My protests were ignored as she ordered Leo upstairs and pulled out her phone. "I'm sorry, but I need to protect my family." She called 911 while my husband stood by. "Yes, there's a woman at our house claiming to be my husband's deceased wife. She seems mentally ill." My urgent plea was, "Wait. Ask me anything. Anything about us that only I would know," I implored Marcus. "Our first date was at that terrible Chinese place. You got food poisoning. Leo was born during a snowstorm." Marcus's expression changed. Sophia interrupted. "Anyone could find that out. Social media, talking to friends." "Ma'am, I understand grief makes people do things, but this is cruel." "The C-section scar on my stomach," I said. "That looks like a sword." Marcus's face blanched. "How do you know that?" I revealed my sword-shaped C-section scar by lifting my shirt. Marcus stumbled backward. "Oh my God, how is this possible?" Sophia gripped his arm. "Marcus, scars can be faked. Don't let her manipulate you." Marcus was clearly conflicted. Within minutes, police arrived. Marcus presented him the death certificate and the police examined my release papers. "These release papers look legitimate." The officer replied. "But so does this death certificate." Let me make some calls. With phone in ear, he walked aside. He returned 20 minutes later. The prison confirms Elena Moreau died 10 months ago, suicide. Body was released to the family. He pitied me. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. If you come back, you'll be arrested. Through the upstairs window I heard Leo wailing as they carried me away. But she knew about the scar. Mommy always said it's because I was her warrior. Sophia's voice calmed him. Sometimes people do research. Your daddy talks about your mommy online. Sometimes people can learn things. But how she said it chilled me. I was going to investigate something suspicious. After 3 blocks, I pulled into an empty parking lot behind a shuttered grocery shop. It was hard to turn off the engine with shaking hands. In my lap was the crumpled release paper the officer had seized to check. I kept hearing him say the prison certified my death 10 months ago. My phone has 4% battery and no charger. I sat back and stared at the car's ceiling, trying to understand what happened. I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's face when he saw me, the way he stared at me like a stranger. Sophia touching his arm protectively, like she owned him, Leo screaming through the window about the scar. Gray light came through the windshield when I opened my eyes, so I must have drifted off. My mouth tasted bad and my neck hurt from the odd angle. I checked my phone, 3% battery, 7:15 a.m. The county records office opened at 8. I drove downtown with my release papers in one hand. The records clerk was sleepy and wore glasses on a chain. I moved my papers across the counter. After looking at them, she typed on her computer. Her finger froze. She stared at the TV, then me, then back. She silently pressed a button on her phone. A supervisor in a tie emerged from a rear office based on his badge. He raised his eyebrows at my computer-typed materials. Ma'am, our system shows you deceased as of 10 months ago. He whispered. Death certificate filed by the Department of Corrections. My stomach sank. That's impossible. I just got out yesterday. I'm right here. Clicked his mouse several times. The record shows Elena Moreau died by suicide in custody. There's a death certificate. Paused. Would you like a copy? I nodded because I couldn't speak. He went into the back and emerged with a printed certificate with my name, birth date, death date 10 months ago, prison doctor's signature and a real-looking state seal. I shakily walked to my car and compared the 2 documents in the driver's seat. Letterhead, autographs and stamps adorned the release sheets. Official letterhead, signatures and stamps were on the death certificate. Both appeared real. They possessed state seals. Someone with access to official systems and papers took great pains to manufacture a death certificate and upload it to government databases while keeping me alive in prison. I had to determine who and why, but where to begin. The jail counselor mentioned a downtown re-entry resource center for transitioning prisoners. I had only $45 in release funds and nowhere to stay. Before the battery died, I typed the address into my phone and drove there. Old brick structure with faded sign housed the re-entry facility. When I entered, the front desk clerk looked up. As I explained my circumstances, her look went from polite inquiry to shock to alarm. She took her phone mid-sentence and dialed. I need to connect you with legal aid right now, stated. This is way beyond normal re-entry stuff. You need a lawyer who understands criminal justice and civil identity problems. She directed me to a corner PC while calling. I entered my old email account with my remembered password. Everything appeared odd when the account opened. I reviewed my login history and found a foreign IP address 10 months ago. My password changed that day. I was shut out when the death certificate arrived. Someone had hijacked my email to prevent me from communicating. Back at the front desk, I requested the phone. I called the prison's records department from memory after the woman gave it to me. A board clerk replied. I requested my phone and outgoing mail logs. She held me. 20 minutes of terrible elevator music later, she returned. Those records require a formal written request. Processing takes 5 to 7 weeks. The call ended with me feeling defeated. I didn't have time, paperwork, or waiting. Re-entry worker grinned at me and said, "Legal aid is calling you back. They're scheduling an intake appointment." 5 minutes later, her phone rang. She gave it to me, and I spoke to someone who scheduled me with Nadia Keller, an attorney, 4 days later. 4 days without sleep felt like eternity, and my son thought I was dead. Re-entry worker must have seen my face because she called again and obtained me a nighttime emergency shelter bed. I thanked her and left with a slip of paper with the address. Back in my car, I kept thinking about Leo's face when he spotted me. How his eyes brightened up briefly before dread took over. He recognized me. He remembered my voice, grin, and smell. He knew I was his mom before Sophia convinced him differently. I found a notebook in my glove compartment and wrote down every detail of our life together, including how I made dinosaur-shaped pancakes, the song I sang when he couldn't sleep, the game we played where we pretended his toy cars could talk, the time he broke his arm falling off the swing and I held him in the emergency room, his favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunk, and the scar on his knee from learning to ride his bike. Things only his real mother knew. I may need these to prove myself. The re-entry worker gave me the shelter address to drive to. The structure was run down, with peeling paint and a flickering entrance light. I received a locker key and a thin blanket from a front desk employee who checked my name against a list. I spotted an empty cot along the back wall in the sleeping room with rows of cots. I sat on the cot with my release form on my lap after putting my car keys and notebook in the locker. My property inventory document stated my toothbrush, 3 books, a 6-year-old photo of Leo, 2 pairs of socks, underwear, and the prison-issued clothes I wore out in my cell when I was released. However, I remembered writing at least 5 letters to Marcus in the weeks before my assumed death 10 months ago, about Leo's birthday, counting down the days till freedom, and missing them both. The outgoing mail log on my property sheet did not indicate the mailings. After writing a letter to my sister 10 months ago, the log halted, and my ability to contact with the outside world vanished overnight. Someone's alarm 3 cots over woke me up early. I felt gritty from sleeping in my clothes, and my back suffered from the thin mattress. I took my belongings from the locker and left before breakfast. The death certificate Marcus showed me mentioned the cemetery and plot number. I entered the address into my phone and drove across town. Open cemetery gates. I walked the meandering route past rows of headstones to the section number. After parking and walking across soggy grass, I studied names and dates on markers until I saw my name, Elena Moreau, my birth date, and a 10-month-old death date. Fresh flowers were in a metal vase on the headstone. Marcus and Leo have likely visited my tomb recently. Looking at my headstone, I felt like I was seeing myself from outside. This was real. Someone bought it. Who inscribed my name in stone? My supposed body was buried here. Everything felt awful and made my skin crawl. I snapped images of the gravestone, flowers, plot number marker, and funeral home name inscribed at the bottom with my phone. I returned to my car and looked up the 3-block funeral home address. I drove to their small lot and parked. The brick building with white columns tried to be sophisticated but looked antiquated. Inside smelt like flowers and carpet cleaning. I entered to find a dark-suited man looking up from a desk. I requested to speak to Elena Moreau's arrangers from 10 months ago. He seemed confused and inquired whether I was related. Calling as Elena Moreau, I requested the file. He paled and rose up, claiming he needed the director. Franz Meyer, an older man, emerged a few minutes later. I could tell he thought I was a scammer or nuts when he inquired what was up. He saw the jail ID bracelet they neglected to tear off when I left when I showed him my release papers and wrist. He went from defensive to astonished. I was told to wait and he went into a back office. He returned with a big folder. Sitting at a table in a small conference room, he opened it carefully. Dr. Henrik Olsen from the prison medical unit signed the death certificate on top. The funeral home received a transport authorization form with Department of Corrections letterhead instructing them to accept and prepare the deceased for burial. Franz's hand shook slightly as he turned pages. Talking quietly, he recounted what happened 10 months ago. The body arrived in a sealed transport bag with my name and prisoner number on it. The documentation indicated, closed casket only. No viewing due to the death. Though rare, prison fatalities involving violence or trauma were not uncommon. Marcus made plans and signed papers, but never saw the body. Prison officials requested the remains remain sealed for health and safety. Franz acknowledged this troubled him because he typically needed family identification, but the documentation was so formal and complete that he followed jail routine. Marcus chose a casket, approved the headstone, and paid everyone. Marcus, Leo, and some friends attended the burial 4 days later. Franz showed me service images of my son clutching his father's hand near to the casket. So I asked Franz for copies of everything in the file. He paused, looking at the paperwork, my face, and my jail ID bracelet. Last, he claimed he would make duplicates because this whole situation felt terrible to him even then. The folder was copied at a corner machine, which hummed and clicked for several minutes. The transit authorization, death certificate, intake notes showing how the sealed body arrived, Marcus's invoice and everything else were slid across the table when he returned. I thanked him and departed before he reconsidered helping me. After returning to the shelter, I set out my release papers, death certificate and funeral home papers, property inventory sheet, and stopped mail log on an empty table in the common area. On the back of an envelope I wrote a chronology with a pen. Something happened 10 months ago that stopped my letters. My email password was changed by an unknown user at the same time. A prison doctor signed a death certificate the same week. My sealed body arrived at the funeral home days later. Marcus received official notice. There was a funeral. Family buried someone they thought was me. I did all of this in my cell, unconscious that the world thought I was dead. A social worker walking the shelter stopped at my table to inquire if I needed help. I told them I needed food stamps and emergency cash after being freed. I filled out various forms with her guidance. We received error notices when we submitted both applications online. My state database listed me as dead. While calling the benefits office, the social worker was transferred 3 times before giving up. She indicated support programs would not work until my legal status was resolved. I had the same problem getting a library card to use their computers. The librarian entered my name and SSN, looked at her laptop, and claimed she couldn't provide a card to a deceased state record subject. The systems I touched treated me like a ghost. My second night at the shelter, I wrote Marcus a long notebook letter. Missing letters on my property inventory, burial with my name, funeral home records showing a sealed body no one identified, blocked email account, and timing of events were all explained. I copied my release documents and printed grave images from my phone at a drugstore. Everything went in Marcus's name-branded envelope. I wanted him to see the evidence in writing without Sophia to intercept or explain it. Maybe seeing it all spelled out will help him comprehend that we both suffered. I checked Marcus's office address online the next morning. He worked at a downtown insurance company in a large office. I drove there and addressed the envelope to Marcus Lindholm's full name and company in the lobby mailroom. I left feeling like I accomplished something tiny but essential after the cashier took it without questions. Since my ID expired while in prison, I headed to the DMV to get a new one. I was in line for 45 minutes before a window. The clerk's countenance shifted as she input my information into her computer. She summoned a supervisor. The supervisor looked at the screen and then at me and stated they couldn't issue ID to a deceased person. I explained the prison error, but the supervisor insisted I settle my status with the State Vital Records Office first. I left the DMV with nothing, unable to establish my identity to any official system. A rundown structure near the courtroom housed the legal aid office on the 3rd floor without an elevator. I descended the stairs with my folder of documents, my legs shaking after the DMV rejection. The waiting room featured plastic seats and outdated periodicals, but the receptionist was sympathetic when I told her I had a Nadia Keller appointment. A 40-year-old woman sat behind a case file-covered desk in a modest office. My throat tightened when Nadia rose up and shook my hand firmly, warm and reassuring. She grabbed a yellow legal paper from the chair across from her desk and started writing. I kept talking, spilling the full narrative while she wrote pages of notes. She probed about dates, times, prison conversations, and death certificate language. When I wrote about Leo remembering my smell and grin, she looked up from her notes with sorrowful eyes but kept writing. She never once thought I was insane or lying, even after hours. She informed me she had handled wrongfully convicted cases, but never one where someone was deleted from official records while alive. After I finished, the legal pad was half full, and she reviewed her notes before speaking. She stated that we needed to file an emergency petition with the court to confirm my identity and acquire a protective order to avoid arrest for being alive. Her voice was firm and professional as she explained the time frame, telling me it may take months and require proof. DNA evidence linking me to Leo and statements from pre-prison acquaintances are crucial. I nodded, trying to grasp while she opened forms on her computer. Her keyboard clicked as she asked me about my family and background. Do I have live relatives who could testify or contribute DNA? My sister lives 2 states away, I informed her. Our relationship was difficult, so we hadn't communicated since before incarceration. Nadia wrote that intricate relationships were still beneficial for DNA comparison. She opened a new window and listed all the proof I had. The release papers with their official stamps and signatures, the funeral home file showing the sealed body transit, the timeline of when my email got locked, and my stopped letters that never reached Marcus. She immediately categorized everything through typing. We needed more, she added without looking up from the screen. My complete jail records, including surveillance footage from the day I purportedly died. Medical papers confirming I was alive and receiving treatment. Visitor logs demonstrating I had contact with staff, and phone records showing my calls. She assured me she would file a Freedom of Information Act request for everything, rapidly typing the document. I requested any case-related documents and video from the Department of Corrections. She opened another document and wrote the prison warden a letter while that printed. As she wrote about evidence preservation and criminal offenses, she became formal and severe. She said she copied the state attorney general's office because this went beyond administrative errors. A person with access to official systems knowingly forged records, a major offense. As each page came out, she signed it with a flourish and slipped it into envelopes as the printer hummed. Watching her work made me feel relieved and anxious. Someone finally did something instead of just telling me I was wrong or confused. After sealing and stacking the envelopes in her outbox for sending, she smiled at me. "This is just the beginning," she said. "But at least now you have representation and a plan." My folder was heavier as I left her office an hour later with copies of everything she filed, walking down those 2 flights of stairs. I finally felt like I could verify what happened to me since arriving at Marcus's door. I felt less panic and uncertainty after days of it. My lawyer believed me and fought bureaucracy. I used the shelter's emergency loaner phone to check the time on the pavement. Still afternoon, hours until dinner. A woman, maybe 35, with a messenger bag and a professional but polite grin approached me as I walked toward the bus stop. She identified as Freya Novak, a criminal justice journalist. She said someone at the re-entry facility noted my circumstance and wanted to hear my story. That Sophia might see my name in the news and use it to keep me from Leo made my stomach churn. Freya continued, explaining how media attention encouraged bureaucratic institutions to move faster since nobody wanted to appear incompetent. She promised to check every detail before publishing and protect my privacy while exposing the jail system. I examined her face to determine her trustworthiness. She presented a business card with her name, the newspaper logo, and links to her wrongful conviction and prison reform articles. I glanced at the stories on her phone and saw significant investigations that changed policy. I agreed to discuss, and we met at a coffee shop 2 blocks away where she bought me lunch while I repeated everything. After seeking permission, she filmed our chat on her phone and wrote notes in a coffee-stained spiral notebook. My timeline, documentation, funeral home, and sealed body explanations took 2 hours. When I showed her Franz's transport protocol file, she got excited and took shots of every page with her phone. "This was highly unusual," she remarked. "It's rare for a body to come sealed without viewing. It implies that someone with institutional power planned the cover-up, manipulating official documents and transport procedures." She photographed my release papers, death certificate, grave images, and everything. She packed up her notes and vowed to phone the Department of Corrections once we finished. She would ask officials about my issue and see what happened. She said their reaction would reveal whether this was a mistake or intentional. I took the bus back to the shelter, feeling vulnerable and worried about her article. Freya contacted me the next afternoon that the DOC Public Information Office had responded. She said their answer was quick and bureaucratic, saying they were looking into the matter but couldn't share inmate data. "That's government speak for internal panic," she said, because companies only employ such language when they're trying to figure out what went wrong. 4 days after I sent my letter to Marcus's employment, an unknown number called the shelter's loaner phone. Something made me answer after I thought it was spam. Marcus, shivering and uncertain, asked if we might meet somewhere public to chat. He claimed he had read my letter at work and couldn't think about anything else. My palms trembled when I agreed to meet him in the coffee shop where Freya and I talked. After seeing all the information in writing without Sophia's protection, his processing changed. I hung up and stared at the phone on my shelter bunk, wondering if he was starting to believe me, or if he required more information before calling me crazy. My following afternoon arrival found the coffee shop almost empty, with only a few laptop users. Marcus was sitting at a corner table, and I could see he looked bad from across the room. Black circles under his eyes, crumpled shirt, and hair that looked like he'd been combing it all night. Paper-filled manila folder rested on the table in front of him. Sitting across from him, I watched him shake hands and open the folder. He laid out the death certificate, burial program, and jail letters in neat rows on the table between us like evidence at a crime scene. His voice was harsh when he finally spoke, questioning how this could be real if I was sitting in front of him. I pulled out my release documents with official seals and signatures. I showed him my paperwork's dates to show him when my letters and calls should have reached him. He looked at the papers for a while before saying something that made my chest tighten. He found it unusual when my letters and calls stopped coming, but the jail counselor stated I was withdrawing emotionally before the suicide. I was withdrawing from everyone to prepare, they told him. The counselor portrayed it as a familiar trend. Marcus grabbed his phone with shaky hands. He viewed his texts and faced me. My text from 10 months ago was fake. I couldn't handle prison anymore. So he should forget me and move on. I felt sick looking at those words because I never penned them. None of my texts were like that. I told him I didn't know how someone texted him from my phone. Clearly, someone did. Someone wanted him to think I quit. He felt I was leaving. So I asked him about the goodbye note the warden purportedly gave him personally. Marcus paled and groped for his wallet. He said he had carried it folded in leather for 10 months. The paper was mushy and crumpled from hundreds of folds and unfolds. He handed it to me carefully, and I read. The wording were inaccurate, but Marcus believed it since the handwriting resembled mine. The language was rigid and professional, unlike my writing or speaking. It said accepting my fate and finding serenity, which I never used. It spoke distantly about Leo, which made me want to scream because I never wrote that about my son. Marcus studied my face as I read. His eyes were changing, like he was now considering that I might be telling the truth. What did I need from him? He whispered. There was no point in avoiding it, so I informed him. I required DNA testing to verify I was Leo's mother. I needed him to stop treating me like a scary stranger trying to hurt his family. I needed his help to discover out what happened and who targeted us. He nodded hesitantly and agreed to the DNA test. He said that he needed time to think before involving Leo. He said Sophia was afraid I would damage their family. She was pregnant and frightened about my homecoming affecting her baby, Leo, and everything they'd built. He had to figure out how to manage it without scaring everyone. I wanted to argue for quick access to my son, but I kept calm. We typed phone numbers into each other's phones at the table. Marcus pledged to assist with Nadia's legal actions and not fight me over identity restoration. He briefly touched my arm as we stood up to depart. The rapid collision almost caught me off guard. He apologized for not believing me, saying the death certificate and burial felt real. Accepting my absence was easier than challenging prison records. I rode the bus back to the shelter in a stupor, mixed up, fatigued, and hopeful for the first time since this nightmare began. Everything changed when Marcus became an ally. Even if the way ahead was still rough and complicated, at least I had someone who believed me and could help prove my identity. Nadia Keller called 2 days later. Her news accelerated my pulse. After her official petitions and Freya's article, the Department of Corrections assigned an internal investigator to my case. Inspector Lucia Caruso from the Office of Inspector General wanted to talk to me. Nadia provided me the downtown government office building address and urged me to bring all my documents. Bureaucracy oozed from the gray concrete and glass edifice. Lucia Caruso met me in a modest third-floor conference room. Perhaps 40, she had dark hair pushed back and piercing eyes that saw everything. I was busy from the moment I entered. She turned on a tabletop recorder before we sat down. She probed my final months in prison with comprehensive questioning. Her questions included my daily routine, which cops worked my housing unit, and who handled my mail. She asked about my 10-month-old issue about missing outbound letters. She took careful notes whenever I answered. She used a corner scanner to duplicate my release papers, death certificate, funeral home paperwork, and cemetery photos. She was curious about which correctional officials had access to my housing unit and mail room. Her request was to write down every name and face I had seen in those final months before I was meant to die. After the nearly 3-hour interview, I was exhausted. I think Lucia Caruso liked what I gave her. She packed away her notes and recording gear and promised to update me on the investigation. She couldn't reveal what they found, but she promised to keep Nadia informed about my legal case. Lucia closed her folder and stared at me with an unclear face. She switched the monitor to show me something on her computer. My name was listed as deceased 11 months ago. Something seemed wrong as she clicked on the details. She pointed to the verified by field, which had only one name. Marta Varga, mailroom supervisor. Lucia scrolled down to show me my resignation date. 3 weeks after my claimed demise. Time made my stomach drop. I looked up Marta Varga to figure out why it sounded familiar. It hit me like a gut punch. Marta, the mailroom worker, constantly wore too much perfume and had long false nails that clicked on the counter while she sorted packages. I recalled her because she dated Tomasz Varga, a correctional officer on my housing unit. Varga had a thick beard and seemed angry when detainees asked him questions. As usual, jail officials treated you like you were invisible or ignorant, but I never had any serious issues with them. My grievance was filed 10 months ago. I wrote 3 letters to Marcus in a week because Leo's birthday was coming up and I wanted to send at least one. They never reached him. Marta got defensive and said the mail system was backed up and mails were lost when I inquired. Using the proper grievance process, I documented the dates I gave her the letters, and Marcus never received them. Her grievance went to her boss, but I never heard back. 3 weeks later, my outbound email was suspended for a fake regulation violation. Lucia Caruso watched my face as I recalled this. She instructed me to record all details concerning the grievance, including missing letters, interactions with Marta, and any information about Tomasz or other staff members involved, on a yellow legal pad and pen. Since the inquiry was continuing, she couldn't say more, but she said they were investigating whether employees lied to cover up mail theft or other misbehavior. I started writing and the words flowed. I wrote about how Marta usually seemed harried when I brought her outgoing mail and would throw the envelopes into a container without checking. I wrote about the grievance form I filled out and how I received a boilerplate letter indicating my complaint was rejected. I wrote about Tomáš's strange looks after filing the grievance, suggesting he knew something I didn't. I wrote about how my mail rights were suspended after that, and how I had to appeal to write to my family again. Marcus ceased responding to my letters by the time I got my rights back. I felt he hated me or had abandoned our marriage. I never thought someone would make me disappear from the system. I kept writing with a shaking pen. Inspector Lucia Caruso let me take my time, nodding sometimes when I looked up. I wrote what I remembered on 5 pages, front and back. She attentively read the pages and took notes on a separate pad. She then looked at me seriously and said something that chilled me. She advised me to avoid Marta and Tomáš Varga if they were involved. She warned that confronting them could sabotage the inquiry and endanger me. She stated anyone who would cover up their misdeeds thus far may do worse if threatened. Inside, I was shouting despite my pledge not to contact them. To disguise mail theft, these criminals stole my life, identity, and made my husband think I was dead. The thought made me want to vomit in her office. Inspector Caruso escorted me out and promised to update me on the investigation. She cautioned me against impulsively searching for Marta or Tomáš alone. I nodded and left the building, feeling weak. I couldn't concentrate at the shelter. Tomáš's mustache and Marta's clicking nails reminded me of how these two strange people had wrecked everything. Freya texted me that night. Her article was now online. I opened the link and saw the headline. Woman declared dead by prison system, fights to reclaim her life. She wrote it carefully, emphasizing the documents and systemic failings rather than the drama. She included interview comments, images of my release papers next to the death certificate, and concerns about how the jail system could lose track of a living person. The article was great, and I was grateful someone told my tale properly. The piece was spread on social media within an hour. I watched my phone fill with remarks. Most were appalled, asking, "How does this happen?" Some people were doubtful, claiming I was obviously a scam artist or mentally ill, and that there had to be a plausible explanation. Positive comments exceeded negative ones by a lot. Articles were shared and tagged news organizations and government leaders. All this attention seemed like it could be wonderful. Next morning, the shelter director called me into her office. She appeared anxious. She informed me someone called the night before and that I was dangerous and shouldn't be around vulnerable people. My caller said I was violent and unpredictable and placed everyone at risk at the shelter. The director claimed she didn't believe it because I'd been quiet and respectful since I came, but she had to take the threat seriously for liability and resident safety. She was apologetic, but she required me to find another place to stay. It felt like a gut punch. I grabbed my few possessions and contacted Nadia Keller outside the shelter. When I told her what happened, she sounded angry at the caller, not me. She said she had emergency legal aid cash to put me in a cheap motel for a few weeks while we found permanent housing. 3 hours later, I checked into a dingy motel on the fringe of town. The room smelled like cleaning supplies and smoke. The bedspread had unsightly stains, and the TV only had 4 channels, but it had a locked door and no one could tell me to leave. After weeks of shelter pandemonium and years of prison noise and surveillance, privacy felt like the greatest luxury. I spent a few minutes on the bed breathing in the solitude. Marcus texted me. Sophia was outraged by Freya's article, he said. She worried that reporters might visit Leo's house or school and cause disruption. He requested that I refrain from publicity until the legal issues were resolved. I wrote back that I understood and would skip follow-up interviews. I didn't tell him Freya had requested greater coverage. I didn't want to aggravate him and Sophia. 3 days later, Nadia called with news. The court scheduled her emergency petition hearing for 3 weeks. She advised gathering as much evidence as possible during that period. We required my DNA compared to Leo. My whole prison records proved I was alive when I was supposed to be dead. People who knew me before prison had to testify. I jotted down her long list of items to gather on the motel notepad. 3 weeks seemed like no time to prove my existence. Contacting my sister was Nadia's first priority. Anna and I hadn't spoken in almost 5 years since our big dispute about money I borrowed and never paid back before incarceration. I called her after 7 minutes of staring at my phone on the motel bed. On the 4th ring she answered. Her voice seemed worn and older. She went silent for 30 seconds after I told her it was me. She started crying and asked how this was possible after receiving a letter from the prison priest 10 months earlier, indicating I had died. The letter had prison letterhead and everything. She regretted not attending the burial, but she was broke, lived 2 states away, and our relationship was so awful. I informed her about the bogus death certificate, Marcus remarrying, and Leo assuming I was dead. Anna told herself she should have phoned the prison to confirm, but she felt prison officials wouldn't lie about someone dying. She stated she had the chaplain's letter. She stored it in a family photo box. She promised to scan and email me immediately. I then addressed the difficult question: would she offer a DNA sample to verify we were sisters and speak about our family history in court? Anna agreed quickly. She wanted to help clean up and apologized for not being there when I needed her. We talked for almost an hour about all that had happened in the years we hadn't spoken. She informed me about her divorce, growing kids, and grocery store employment. It was amazing to have relatives again, even those I'd been upset with for years. Anna sent the chaplain's letter scan over email after we hung up. The prison insignia and Chaplain Etienne Rousseau's signature made it look legitimate like the other false documents. I sent it to Nadia immediately. 4 days later, Nadia called to say she had arranged DNA testing at a state lab. The appointment was for 9 a.m. the next day. Marcus would bring Leo, and Anna was driving from out of state to offer her sample. I barely slept that night, worrying about seeing Leo in clinic again. In a downtown medical facility with white walls and fluorescent lights, the lab seemed chilly and unpleasant. Early I waited in the waiting area for Marcus and Leo. My son looked little, grasping his dad's hand through those glass doors. I purchased him his favorite dinosaur-themed blue shirt for his 7th birthday. After seeing me sitting, Leo stopped walking and stared. I smiled at him but didn't say anything because Nadia advised me the court's temporary order prohibited interaction during the appointment. The lab tech brought us back to a room with 3 chairs and a supply-covered metal table. She calmly told Leo it would be a brief swab inside his cheek and wouldn't hurt. Leo stared at me while she spoke, like he was thinking. Marcus protected Leo with his hands on his shoulders behind him. The tech rubbed the swab inside my cheek for 30 seconds to take my sample. Leo sat still and bravely while she administered his sample. I memorized my son's face since I didn't know when I'd see him again. Similar to mine, his eyes were dark brown with gold specks. He had a little chin scar from falling off his bike aged 5. I wanted to embrace him, draw him into my arms and never let go, but I sat with my hands folded in my lap. The tech tagged all tubes with numbers and barcodes after Leo. Leo asked me quietly about saying something after Marcus told him they may leave. Marcus nodded despite discomfort. Leo told me I smelled like his mama, which confused him. Marcus let him out before I could answer. Another 20 minutes passed while I waited for Anna. In the waiting room we hugged long after she arrived. Her eyes were the same despite her older, slimmer appearance. After taking Anna's sample, the tech said the findings would take 12 days with Nadia's fast processing. When I realized the science would establish I was Leo's mother and never perished in that prison cell, 12 days felt like forever. The 12 days in the motel were spent watching bad TV and trying not to get impatient. Inspector Lucia Caruso called on day 7 with investigative findings. She said prison surveillance showed me alive and wandering around my housing unit on my supposed death date. I was filmed in the day room, chow hall and cell. She also interviewed several women from my unit, who affirmed I was alive and well that week. Several people reported seeing and chatting to me the day the death certificate indicated I killed myself. Lucia sounded more serious when she continued. 4 days before my supposed demise, she found Greta home, an inmate who died of a heart attack or other medical issue. Since Greta had no family, her remains was released to the county for burial in the prison cemetery for single convicts. The worrisome element is that Greta's death and my fake death were too close together to be a coincidence. Lucia suspected the jail records might have misidentified me as deceased and buried Greta under my name. Thinking about some unfortunate woman buried in a grave with my name on the headstone made me nauseous. If Marta and Tomasz Varga were stealing mail, my Lucia explained her theory. Resentment 10 months ago could have revealed them. Greta's murder could have been an opportunity for them. By declaring me dead in the system, they could dismiss my concerns as clerical errors. Marcus stopped asking about missing letters after my death. I would remain in this bureaucratic nightmare after release. The whole theory made terrible logic and made me want to vomit. They declared me dead and buried someone else under my name to hide stealing mail and other dubious activities. Marcus stopped contacting the prison to ask why his wife hadn't responded. Dead inmates don't submit grievances, so mine would be dismissed. I asked Inspector Lucia Caruso about Marta and Tomasz Varga's fate if this notion is confirmed. Falsifying official records, mail fraud, and civil rights crimes might result in federal charges, she added. The jail administration may be liable for failing to catch such a major system error. Federal agents may investigate. Some may lose their employment. There may be lawsuits. Lucia said she had a good case but needed more proof to file charges. She searched for Greta Holmes' body transfer paperwork and interviewed more mailroom workers. She noted the investigations take time but were progressing. I thanked her and hung up, outraged that individuals would damage my life to cover their crimes, and affirmed that someone in authority believed my tale and was attempting to prove it. 7 days before court, Nadia Keller contacted my motel room at 8 a.m. State lab DNA findings arrived. She read the figures over the phone. 99.96% chance I was Leo's biological mother. My sister's DNA proved our relationship. My identification was clear to the lab. Nadia said she would file the results with the court within an hour and send Marcus's lawyer and the state attorney copies. After hanging up, I stared at the printed email confirmation she sent to the business center downstairs on the motel bed. Science confirmed my suspicions, but seeing those statistics made it true. My phone rang again 2 hours later. Screen displayed Marcus's name. I replied and heard him sobbing before he spoke. He kept apologizing, claiming he couldn't believe he'd buried someone else while I was alive. His voice broke as he wanted to meet again to discuss telling Leo the truth. I agreed immediately. We planned to meet at the same coffee place the next morning. Since Marcus finally believed me, I paced the motel room all day, wondering about seeing him again. I went to the coffee shop early the next morning and sat in the same booth. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later with a manila envelope. His appearance suggested little sleep. Sitting across from me, he slid the envelope. The images were from Leo's 8th birthday party 4 months earlier, which I missed because everyone thought I was dead. I went through the images one by one. Leo in a superhero cape, blowing out Batman cake candles, opening Sophia-owned presents in our living room. I wanted to scream seeing my son's face in those moments. I should have been there. Marcus started talking after seeing me gaze at the images. He said Sophia was struggling to accept my existence. She thought I was gone forever and formed a family with him. She was 8 months pregnant and worried about my homecoming and her marriage and kid. I understood why she felt that way, but it didn't change my needs. I told Marcus I didn't want to damage his new family, but I wouldn't leave Leo's life. Leo deserved to know his actual mother, so we had to find a way to live together, even if it was chaotic and uncomfortable. Marcus nodded and proposed supervised visits when the court confirmed my identity. That would allow Leo to adjust incrementally rather than all at once. Not what I wanted. I wanted to hug my son forever, but I agreed, since pushing too hard too fast could injure Leo. The court hearing was Tuesday morning. At 9 a.m., Nadia greeted me outside the courthouse. After security, we waited in a hallway for our case. The courtroom was smaller than imagined. The judge sat at a tall wooden desk. A state attorney sat at one table. Nadia and I sat together. Sister flew in and sat in the gallery behind us. Nadia stood and presented our evidence. DNA results showing 99.96% certainty I was Leo's mother. Prison surveillance footage showing me alive and moving around on the date I supposedly died. Franz Meyer's funeral home file showing the sealed body transport and irregular identification process. Lucia Caruso's investigation findings about Marta Varga and the suspicious timing of everything. My sister's testimony about our family. State attorney stood when Nadia concluded. He claimed the state accepted the facts and agreed to restore my identification immediately. The judge inspected her desk's documents. She had me stand and say my name for the record. "Elena Moreau," I shouted in court. Judge issued her order immediately. She said I was alive and all state agencies must change their records immediately because the death certificate was erroneous. She ordered supervised visitation with Leo while a complete custody evaluation was scheduled. I felt odd leaving the courts with formal documentation of my existence. On the steps outside, Nadia Keller hugged me after weeks of ghost treatment. She stated this was just the start. We had to seek accountability and obtain permanent custody. However, I was alive again and legally Leo Lindholm's mother. I'm done for today. I always attempt to give you more than a tale. If it provided you an idea or clarity, it worked. I thought my grandfather's money could save my mom's life, until I learned he shut down her clinic. Turns out, it was his biggest mistake. My mother was diagnosed, so I called every family with money for treatment support. My uncle with his Mercedes collection advised better planning. My aunt with the beach mansion denied responsibility. My grandfather, who owned half downtown commercial real estate, hung up when I cried. After years of boasting about their wealth, they didn't show up. After posting on our neighborhood Facebook site about requiring hospital trips, our elderly neighbor arrived with a casserole and a driving schedule within an hour. She barely knew us beyond greeting. 3 strangers deep cleaned our house the next morning to prevent Mom from getting illnesses. Our landlord lowered our rent without asking. My little brother's school lunch lady started preparing extra food for him to take home. Despite their poverty, they came every day while my wealthier relatives uploaded Italy vacation images. I held my mother when she cried when her hairdresser shaved her head for free at our house. The mechanic fixed our automobile for free so we could obtain therapy. The corner store owner sometimes forgot to charge us for groceries. These people kept us alive while my family ignored us. I learned about our city in the waiting room during Mom's second round of treatment. A mom told me her son died because the nearest hospital was 38 minutes away. The man I met lost his house to medical debt despite working 3 jobs. Everybody told how the system failed them while rich people like my family built another mall nobody needed. A young organizer urged me to help protest the shuttered health clinic as I was there every day. I attended city council meetings between Mom's treatments and heard that my grandfather's company lobbied to close the clinic because the site was valuable. The granddad who wouldn't give us a penny robbed hundreds of people's healthcare to build luxury apartments. I began journaling every injustice and story. I had 180 pages of reasons to fight back by Mom's last treatment. After 8 months of misery, Mom went into remission, and our neighborhood staged a park picnic with food everyone had saved. My uncle drove by in his Tesla without slowing. That night, the organizer asked if I'd considered running for mayor since I saw everyone's hardships. I had 450 campaign volunteers in a month, and all of them had been abandoned by the system. 7 years had passed since my grandfather's golf pal hosted town hall. Bake sales and car washes funded our campaign, while developers wanted to build luxury condos where the food bank was. We registered 7,500 system-abandoned voters by knocking on every door in the district. We were ahead by single digits but growing weekly in polls. I had volunteers work 18-hour days because they felt we could alter things. Mom was our unofficial mascot, and survivors cried at rallies when they saw her. My granddad arrived at campaign headquarters with his lawyer while we led the polls by 14 points. He appeared worried after 2 years without talking to me. He threatened to evict every volunteer in his buildings if I didn't drop out. He owned half the apartment buildings in our district through unknown shell corporations. I have 46 of your volunteers on my tenant lists, he added, presenting me the papers with familiar names. Everyone gets 28 days notice tomorrow if they don't concede today. I informed him that was illegal, but his lawyer chuckled and said, "Good luck proving retaliation when they all missed rent during medical emergencies." My volunteers didn't know their slumlord was my grandfather, and finding out would ruin the campaign. He gave me till midnight to decide. I had 4 hours to win or keep 46 families home. On election night, our victory party's fire alarm went off from 18 points ahead. We evacuated quietly until we spotted smoke coming from the community center where we held voter registration efforts and campaign records. The building where Mom got free chemo meals burned. Her support group's meeting venue burned. The room where kids completed homework while parents worked 3 jobs burned. After fire trucks arrived, everything inside was gone. My grandfather texted, "Electrical fires are so common in old buildings." Another text followed immediately. "Your mother's oncologist works out of one of my medical buildings." A third made my hands shake. "So does the dialysis center where your neighbor gets treatment." A fourth, "And the pharmacy where your volunteers get their insulin." While Mom celebrated our win, I saw the flames burn the place that saved us. People cried, hugged, and took fire photos on their phones. As the news reported our landslide victory, my grandfather texted, "Concede tomorrow, or I start having more electrical problems at the children's clinic." I stood motionless, my phone screen lighting with grandfather's children's clinic threat, while smoke filled the night sky behind me. Mom was celebrating 20 feet away, and I had maybe 10 seconds to decide how to handle this without ruining her success. I shook my hands as I put the phone in my pocket and smiled as Mom ran over with tears of pleasure. While fire trucks wailed and sirens blared, she hugged me, and I thought about whose volunteers lived in grandfather's buildings. I quietly waved the young organizer over from across the evacuation zone while Mom talked to other supporters about our landslide triumph. We stopped near the yellow tape where firefighters were setting up their equipment, and I showed her my phone's texts, seeing her face blanch as she read each threat concerning the medical facilities and children's clinic. She grabbed my arm, and we quickly agreed to suspend any public concession while we protected volunteers from illegal eviction. I distracted Mom by pointing out supporters in the crowd and praising them while the organizer called for emergency legal help. In an hour, while the fire brigade poured water on the blazing ruins, the organizer introduced us to Marco Esposito, a tenants' rights attorney who had fought unjust evictions. He promised to meet us at 7:30 in the morning and ordered us to photograph everything before it disappeared. I screenshotted every grandfather communication and sent it to numerous email accounts, including one I made for this reason. I snapped images of the burning building from different angles, shaking with fury and dread, to document the destruction of the place that saved us throughout Mom's cancer treatment. Since our voter registration records were destroyed with the building, our campaign IT lead checked his laptop for backups. He identified partial voter lists in the cloud he uploaded last week but confirmed that most of our organizing paperwork, including volunteer contact sheets, were only in the ash-covered filing cabinets. As midnight arrived, the gathering thinned, and I got Mom home and into her bed, not telling her about the threats because stress could disrupt her remission. Keeping this from her weighed against my duty to safeguard her health, but I knew she'd fight if she realized what grandfather was doing. After she fell asleep, I texted our volunteer coordinators to secretly check whether team members rented from West Side Properties or Riverside Holdings without explaining why. I got 46 names in 1 hour, including Nina Calder, who led our biggest canvassing effort and knocked on 1,800 homes. As I stared at grandfather's list of families he could kill at my kitchen table, I purposefully missed midnight without surrendering. The organizer texted that she was making plans with volunteers for eviction letters and has lawyers ready to file emergency injunctions in the morning. After midnight, my phone went silent, which was worse than another threat because I didn't know what grandfather would do. After the fire, I spent the night searching through our campaign information on computers and phones to reconstruct what we lost. I received what the tech lead could recover, which was only 20% of what we'd developed over months of organizing. I dozed on the couch for a few hours at 2:45 a.m., before seeing Marco Esposito, knowing the fight would start when I woke up. Grandfather controlled their homes and clinics, even though the community elected me by 18 points. I'd won the election, but he'd showed me he could destroy everything I cared about if I didn't follow his rules. I answered my phone at 2:45 a.m., and the organizer started chatting before I could say hi. While I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, she planned everything. She called 11 volunteers to set up emergency tenant meetings the next day. She contacted 3 housing-related media contacts. She spoke for 9 minutes on turning grandfather's threats into our biggest weapon while I took notes on an envelope. I had 4 pages of action items and shaking hands from non-fear by the time she hung up. I prepared coffee and texted the volunteer coordinators she mentioned to covertly promote the meetings without posting anything online. Marco Esposito arrived at my door at 7 with a briefcase and donuts. I signed forms where he pointed as he explained temporary restraining orders on my kitchen table. He claimed we had an excellent case but then outlined grandfather's lawyer's tactics. He sought confirmation that my grandfather owned Westside Properties and Riverside Holdings, not merely shell corporations. He took out more discovery and subpoena forms. While stressing that judges don't appreciate emergency orders without concrete evidence of immediate damage. He took images of my phone with grandfather's texts and made me write down all I knew about his campaign headquarters visit. Since landlords may always identify technical lease infractions to justify evictions, establishing retribution would be difficult. He had 38 pages of legal documentation to file by 9 but doubted our chances. Called Camille Duran from my car on my way to meet Marco at the courts after finding her number in my old campaign notes. She heard the first call and knew about the fire from the news. I informed her of probable development interests without naming grandfather. I heard her typing as she asked pointed questions regarding timing and paperwork. She requested copies of threats, ownership documents for volunteer housing, and a fire timeline. She said she had people who could assist her connect housing corruption dots after 3 years of investigation. She wouldn't promise anything without proof, but she'd meet once I had more. I met Clara Weiss from the fire department at lunchtime and saw yellow tape around the burning community center. She explained where they found burn patterns and inquired when I noticed the smoke and who was at the victory celebration. She took notes in a little notepad while I explained the election results before the fire. She said the probe was suspicious based on preliminary results but couldn't reveal more. She requested my mobile number and stated she could have follow-up questions that couldn't be answered officially. She glanced over the building for a while before warning me to be careful and consider staying somewhere for a few nights. While I was outside the burning building, Tomas Richter called to meet immediately. He uncovered patterns I needed in clinic closure records after staying up all night. He presented maps and timings of grandfather's enterprise's systematic targeting of properties near transit lines and hospitals at a diner. The clinic wasn't just important land, it was part of a neighborhood-wide expulsion scheme. He gave me correspondence from public records requests showing the closure was planned 3 years in advance. He promised to share everything with my legal team and called other advocates fighting similar cases. We spent 4 hours reviewing documents while he described how they fit into systematic displacement. A statement regarding the fire was drafted at 5 by the campaign team to avoid grandfather's lawyer's ammo. We meticulously removed any hint of arson or threat link in 11 drafts. The final version expressed grief about losing a community landmark and complimented the fire brigade for their rapid reaction. We shared it on social media and with local news outlets, seeing response numbers rise. People started talking about the community center and volunteering to rebuild without knowing someone had set it on fire. The organizer took media calls while maintaining the agreed message of focusing on the future rather than the cause. A courier delivered an urgent mail from grandfather's legal company to my flat at 6:30 that evening. The cease and desist letter said I would defame his firm. It threatened legal action if I publicly linked him to the fire or suggested criminality. Marco Esposito chuckled when I emailed him images, saying they'd shown their fright. He added it to our expanding file and began composing a legal response telling them to pound sand. My phone called at 6:15 the next morning, and Nina broke down as she informed me about the eviction notice on her door. 27 days to leave for lease issues they claimed occurred months ago but were only handled today. From knocking on 1,800 doors for our campaign, she would become homeless. I jotted down every detail of the notice and pledged to fight it while she apologized like it was her fault. In an hour, 13 more volunteers contacted with the identical narrative and 27-day deadline. Camille evaluated my findings at a downtown coffee shop. The ownership documentation Marco found and grandfather's threatening texts were photographed by her. She said her editor required 2 independent sources before publishing anything linking him to the fire. She has researchers investigating shell firms, but told me they take time. She asked about other volunteers who could go on the record and developed a database of eviction victims. She pledged to safeguard sources but suggested sharing some experiences would strengthen the article. Clara texted me that afternoon stating they'd detected accelerant at many locations in the building but required more testing before declaring it official. She advised me to spread out my everyday excursions and avoid lonely locations. She couldn't tell more via text but suggested we meet soon to discuss their findings. 4 days later, Tomas called me as I was sifting through our campaign files and said he knew a state attorney general's office employee who could help with housing. Thomas had given Isabel Moreau, who worked in their housing discrimination unit, the standard eviction warnings. She had boxes of case files everywhere in her 4th-floor office when I drove to the state building that afternoon, heard everything about the 46 volunteers facing eviction, and took notes on a yellow legal pad while asking precise questions about dates and names. She said state participation in local housing disputes required proof of a pattern across numerous counties and advised I check for similar issues in other locations where grandfather had property. She gave me her direct contact and advised to call if we found additional proof, but warned me these cases took months or years to construct. Our IT lead panicked on the way back to campaign headquarters after discovering that half our donor records were destroyed in the fire, making it impossible to trace our campaign funds. He tried to recreate on his computer using bank records and emails, but tons of little cash gifts from bake sales and car washes had no paper trace. Since we couldn't verify our funding was lawful, the incumbents' people would use this against us if they challenged the election results. I urged him to keep working and document anything he could retrieve while I decided what to do. While helping him sort bank records that night, we discovered 11 failed login attempts from unfamiliar IP addresses in our campaign email account. Someone had been trying to access our accounts for 4 days with different passwords. We updated all our passwords and enabled 2-factor authentication, wondering what else grandfather was trying to access. The tech lead updated our security software and checked all accounts for unusual activities. Mom had a cancer center follow-up 3 days later and couldn't move it without compromising her health. I felt sick walking through grandfather's medical building's cancer center doors, since he controlled everything within. I sat in the waiting room with her, staring at the other patients who didn't realize their landlord owned the facility. The nurse called Mom back for blood work and scans while I watched people pass through the automatic doors in the lobby. All doctors here paid rent to grandfather's company and risked losing office space if they crossed him. I couldn't cheer when Mom walked out an hour later with good blood counts because we were in his building. I kept looking over my shoulder for his security guards or lawyers as we strolled to the parking garage in silence. 13 volunteers facing eviction attended Nina's library meeting that afternoon, ready to fight. They formed an emergency tenants council to share information and assist each other throughout eviction. Nina promptly formed legal research, media outreach, and mutual help committees. Watching these individuals battle for their houses gave me more strength that week than anything else. Daily check-ins and a phone tree ensured no one faced this alone. The next morning, a blocked number called my personal phone, and grandfather's voice faked concern about the community center fire. He heard about the incident and asked if our family could discuss it since we'd gone through so much. He kept talking about how unsafe old buildings are and how decent people might get hurt, so I recorded him on my phone. He recommended we meet for coffee to address the subject like family instead of foes and hinted at greater problems if we didn't agree immediately. I held my cool and said I was too busy with transition plans to meet but would consider his offer. He promised to call again and advised me to keep together in tough times before hanging up. 9 minutes later, the incumbent mayor's chief of staff called our main campaign line to say they were considering challenging the election results owing to the damaged records. He said the lack of paperwork raised issues about proper processes and their responsibilities to safeguard election integrity. The organizer quickly called volunteers to acquire sworn affidavits from every voter we'd registered while memories were fresh. We have 4 days to gather 7,200 statements for certification. Everyone stopped to help find voters and acquire their signatures on legal documents. Lucas Navarro, who worked at grandfather's company, emailed me about the health clinic closure that evening. He recommended a coffee shop across town where no one from the company would notice us because he was afraid to meet near the workplace. I invited Marco to a meeting the next morning for safety, and to hear Lucas's remarks. Lucas arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the back corner booth, nervously gazing about. He found a folder of printed emails from 3 years ago indicating grandfather's company contemplating clinic property development before it closed. These emails discussed ways to bankrupt the clinic so they could buy the land cheaply. Lucas's hands shook as he claimed he kept these records because he knew it was wrong but was too terrified to act until now. He agreed to be a source if his name was kept private. Only 9 of our volunteers were safeguarded from eviction after the court judgment on interim restraining orders 3 days later. The judge stated the others needed more proof of retaliation. Though Nina was safe, 34 families suffered homelessness in 4 weeks. Marco began appeals while the tenants' council protested outside the courts. That afternoon, the fire department reported an unclear cause pending further inquiry. The report said they were continuing testing and questioning witnesses but couldn't decide. Clara texted me 9 minutes after the news was public, stating they were constructing a strong case. But these things required time, and I had to be patient while they gathered court-worthy evidence. The state attorney general's Isabel Moreau contacted the next morning to organize a 4-day intake interview. She immediately stated that the AG required proof of patterns affecting numerous counties, not just our city. I called activists in surrounding towns the rest of the day and found 6 more clinics that inexplicably closed before luxury constructions. Isabel took notes throughout our 2.5-hour conversation but stressed that documentation was key. She provided me a list of data to obtain and advised I check for comparable issues in other states. Meanwhile, the community began fundraising to reconstruct the destroyed center. In 52 hours, car washes, bake sales, and GoFundMe sites raised $28,000. Since the fire department had identified it as a crime scene, we couldn't touch a brick. Kids have nowhere to conduct homework after school, while the money sat in a bank account. Seniors who got free lunches there went hungry. Support groups in that facility crowded into a church basement. 4 nights after the fire, an unmarked car parked across from my apartment building. Someone watched it for 3.5 hours. 2 officers arrived 25 minutes after I contacted the police. My report was checked, but the driver had a right to park on a public street. The police claimed they couldn't help until the person threatened me or breached the law. I noticed the automobile parked a block away the next morning after the police left. Our tech lead spent days recovering voter data from backups and personal laptops. He assembled 62% of our registration lists from volunteer emails and spreadsheets. Unfortunately, much of our donation records and organizing maps were lost forever. We'd have to reconstruct our infrastructure while running the city. Volunteers debated revealing grandfather owned their apartment buildings. Half wanted complete transparency to show voters our opponents. The other half feared I would use public office for a family conflict. Nina suggested focusing on eviction threats without named grandfather. Another suggestion was to wait for fire investigation evidence. People yelled about tactics while their houses were at risk. Marco told us to stay strategic and deny grandfather's lawyers ammunition. We issued a careful statement about development dangers after 2 days of debate. We didn't identify anyone but said influential people were trying to thwart our reforms. The statement had hundreds of social media shares immediately. Many commented on being evicted by developers. Local news covered it, and city development corruption became a hot topic. Camille wrote her first piece linking the clinic closure to a developer network after days of research. She didn't name grandfather, but enough details were given to make connections. The report illustrated how the same corporations appeared when public services closed. She had maps, timetables, and former city employee quotes confirming the pattern. It went viral locally with thousands of shares in the first few hours. Silent city officials had to answer reporters' questions about the ties. That afternoon, Lucas sent me grandfather's company's internal communications from 3 years before the clinic closed. When available, the clinic land would be ideal for luxury condos, according to emails. They were told to start planning because the clinic would close in 16 months. Lucas handed up the printed documents at our meeting site, shivering. He kept looking about for followers. He agreed to be a protected source but asked me not to reveal the document leaker. Camille, Isabel and Marco received copies shortly after I swore to protect him. The clinic shutdown wasn't due to budget issues, and these emails proved it. 3 days later, a process server brought a large envelope to campaign headquarters. Slap complaint filed by grandfather's lawyers claimed my public words damaged his company reputation. They demanded $3 million and an immediate apology for anything I stated. Marco reviewed the filing and scoffed at several assertions. He said these lawsuits were meant to sap our finances with legal bills, even if we'd win. Instead of winning in court, they wanted to drain us financially and emotionally. Despite working at lower rates, he projected we'd spend $60,000 protecting against it. I caught Mom crying in the kitchen with her phone that night. She knew grandfather was using her cancer treatment against me. She apologized repeatedly for something she didn't do. She cried while I held her about why I couldn't fight back. She suggested changing oncologists so grandfather couldn't endanger her care. I told her no, because her health always came first. I promised to get through everything as we sat on the kitchen floor for an hour as she wailed. Thomas contacted me before coffee the next morning, with documents on his desk. After all night searching city records, he found something that made him shake. The community center had 16 code infractions in 3 years, but all were addressed without repairs. The fire department reported poor wiring twice, and the building inspector noted water damage rendering the structure dangerous. The previous government signed off on bogus repairs that never transpired, therefore nothing got fixed. Tomas showed me the signatures on every approval form, and they all belonged to the same city official who received developer campaign payments. The pattern was so obvious even without legal expertise. 2 hours later, I sat across from the incumbent's chief of staff in his old leather and costly cologne-smelling office. He sat back and smiled as I told him about the threats and flames. He said it was political growing pains, and I'd understand after more experience. He told me this was how life worked and advised me to move forward rather than linger on the past. His dismissive tone made my hands tighten under the desk, but I kept my cool while he stated they knew about the corruption. For their eviction press conference that afternoon, the Renters' Council set up microphones outside City Hall. Nina stood at the podium shivering with eviction papers as 31 residents lined up behind her. She said she worked 3 jobs to pay rent but got a notice for helping my campaign. Her voice trembled when she said her kids asked whether they had to switch schools again. Other renters told their stories as reporters took notes and cameras rolled. An elderly guy submitted medical records showing he never skipped rent until the eviction notification. Single mother showed images of mold in her flat that the landlord never fixed despite hundreds of requests. People strolling past stopped to listen, and some started crying when they heard familiar struggles. The next day, District Attorney Adrian Keller met me in a small conference room with a recorder and thick notebook. He read each grandfather SMS word for word and asked me when it arrived. He compared my screenshots to phone records his office had collected. He probed who saw the texts and whether I told anyone about the threats before the fire. Even though he cautioned me that cases proceeded slowly, his systematic approach gave me optimism that someone was finally taking this seriously. He noted down every name I mentioned and requested witness contact information to check the timing. 4 days later, grandfather's lawyer brought an expensive paper settlement offer to campaign headquarters. After sliding it across the table, Marco began reading with his eyebrows rising with each page. If I approved 7 development projects after taking office, all evictions would halt immediately. The food bank was converted into retail, while the original library was demolished for condos. Marco laughed out loud when grandfather's company secured exclusive city construction contracts. With a straight face, the lawyer pretended this was a business pitch, not corruption. Marco shoved the papers away and told him we needed time to think about such a fantastic offer while trying not to smile. The incumbent called an emergency city council session that week to pass a new old building condemnation ordinance. The rule would allow the city to declare any structure over 38 years old hazardous without inspection. With 28 days' notice, developers might buy condemned houses at below market prices. We recognized he was trying to cement grandfather's agenda before leaving government in 3 weeks. The incumbent's allies won despite our council members' attempts to delay the vote. They passed it 9-5 while citizens shouted from the gallery about their homes being robbed. I felt ill seeing them legalize half our district's theft from the back row. Mom entered my room 2 mornings later with her phone in tears. Her full medical history was leaked to a gossip blog, which included her cancer treatment. The blog included her treatment regimen and medical file images of her weight reduction. They leaked our bank statements from when we couldn't afford her prescriptions and screenshots of my urgent texts to family. Mom sat on my bed smiling and said it didn't matter what others thought, but her hands shook. Even though she did nothing wrong, she kept apologizing for burdening the campaign. The blog post received thousands of shares in hours and called us liars and swindlers. Most volunteers were protected at the restraining order hearing the next week. 6 families, including a sick elderly couple, faced eviction in 8 days. We hurried to locate them lodgings as Marco filed emergency appeals that will likely be denied. Churches and allies with additional rooms provided temporary shelter, but splitting up these families felt like letting grandfather win. Camille's second article that afternoon examined the eviction shell firms. She showed how Westside Properties and Riverside Holdings were related to dozens of entities through layers of paperwork. Over 11 years her inquiry documented forced clinic, community center, and small company closures around the city. She didn't name grandfather, but enough details were given to make connections. The story included papers indicating how property values unexpectedly rose after closures. She interviewed evicted tenants whose experiences mirrored ours. Lucas panicked when his supervisor asked why he was missing so many meetings. The supervisor noticed Lucas's car in unexpected places and pondered about home. This was a warning that they suspected something, but Lucas couldn't quit without losing his health insurance. Marco immediately began whistleblower protection paperwork as we documented Lucas's work interactions. We urged him to behave normally and keep copies of questionable emails on a burner phone. After signing whistleblower documents, he vomited in our office restroom from fright. Eric Holm from the arson task force called me at 6:15 the next morning to say the lab results were in, and we needed to meet immediately. He showed me the report showing accelerant residues on the community center's first level when I drove to the police station. He said arson cases often take months or years to pursue, but given the election schedule, this was a priority. While I sent grandfather's menacing SMS again, his team pulled surveillance footage from every shop within 3 blocks. The election board held an emergency meeting that afternoon to schedule next week's certification hearing. The incumbent's lawyers challenged 5 precincts where our voter registration activities had the most impact. They said we couldn't show those votes were authentic without the destroyed documents. Marco started collecting affidavits from every voter registration volunteer, while our tech lead collected bank records showing hundreds of tiny donations from certain communities. We prepared evidence binders till 2:45 a.m. to defend our victory. The next day, my elderly neighbor brought her famous dish and ate with me at the kitchen table. Our town survived before that building and will endure whatever. Grandfather destroyed, she said. Her straightforward remarks reminded me why we were fighting. Mom saw me going over certification hearing records that night and asked if she might speak on what this election meant to her. I worried about her safety with grandfather increasing, but her voice might be what the election board needs. We prepared her statement all night as she practiced keeping calm and focused. All seats were filled at the county courthouse certification hearing with supporters and reporters. Mom spoke for 4 minutes about medicine versus rent before our neighbors intervened. My hairdresser shaved her head for free, and our mechanic fixed our car for free. The room went hushed as she explained how strangers become family while our relatives left us. She concluded, "This election was about neighbors helping neighbors and giving everyone the chance our community gave her." The election board members wiped their eyes as she sat down. Our success was confirmed by the board, 5-1 after 6.5 hours of testimony and analyzing our evidence binders. Voter affidavits and donor records provided overwhelming proof. The incumbent stood up and vowed to monitor for anomalies but couldn't stop certification. Despite the lost documents and grandfather's attempts to steal it, we triumphed. Grandfather's lawyers added $3 million in defamation damages to their slap action 3 days later. They claimed my public pronouncements regarding dangers and development ambitions damaged his business reputation and finances. Marco invited Victoria Leone, a strategic lawsuit attorney who silenced detractors, to join our team pro gratis. She promptly prepared our anti-slap motion after winning scores of these instances. District Attorney Adrian Keller subpoenaed grandfather's phone records to confirm the threatening texts came from his devices. He said the legal wheels turned slowly, but this was official recognition of criminal behavior. His detectives interviewed witnesses and created a fire and threat chronology. Nina's tenants council now included inhabitants from 14 of grandfather's buildings. Their initial building-wide agreement covered residents who engaged in our campaign against retaliation. We plan to use the agreement in all grandfather's city buildings. Tenants complained about years of neglected upkeep and rent increases that drove families out. When mobilizing for collective bargaining, they documented everything. Camille's investigation culminated in a detailed exposé that named grandfather as the mastermind behind decades of healthcare and housing exploitation. Her report featured Lucas's neighborhood clinics and community services. She identified shell corporations, political links, and forcing closures to steal land. The story demonstrated how he stole health treatment from people while developing luxurious residences on the ruins. She blamed one man's avarice for 35 years of agony and provided evidence from families who lost loved ones when the nearest hospital became too far away. Social internet went wild with thousands of accounts of grandfather's exploitation. Former tenants reported improper evictions and unsafe living conditions. Healthcare staff said his lobbying wrecked their clinics. National media calling for interviews increased pressure. Grandfather's lawyers sent cease and desist letters to everyone, but the truth was spreading faster than they could contain. Next morning, I had 29 missed calls and a constant stream of volunteers texting me about grandfather on the news. He was seated across from the anchor in his nice suit, looking unhappy and anxious, when I switched on the TV. Family values and how his grandchild was leveraging personal issues for political gain were discussed. He said the fire was an accident I exploited, and that he had offered to help our family many times but we declined. When he revealed Mom's cancer and wanting to help us, his voice cracked properly. The anchor nodded sympathetically as grandfather blamed ungrateful family. After throwing my sneaker at the TV, it bounced harmlessly as he lied about reconnecting. Marco called me immediately after the segment ended to ask me not to comment. He added people were publishing Camille's writings alongside grandfather's assertions online, contradicting the account. 1,000 comments on the news station's Facebook page called out the lies inside an hour. People told anecdotes of grandfather's buildings and closed clinics. Too many people understood the truth. Thus damage control failed. 4 days later, Eric Holm and 2 other arson task force investigators arrived at my residence. They interviewed all Victory Party attendees in the City Hall conference room. Eric said they couldn't name suspects but were making progress on the case. He requested copies of all threatening texts and detailed chronology questions. His staff reviewed all our evidence. Further investigation of the fire scene revealed accelerant evidence that ruled out unintentional explanations. The investigation intensified, with subpoenas for surrounding building surveillance footage. Eric claimed they were taking this seriously, but said it would take months to create a good case. Leaked records proving grandfather's enterprises targeted underprivileged. Victoria Leone and I spent hours writing an ethics policy to keep things clean. She said I'd have to stay out of city decisions regarding grandfather's homes or companies. She felt bad leaving when his constructions damaged people, but she maintained it was the only way to stay legitimate. We devised steps for the deputy mayor to manage those challenges. I could not be accused of using my office for revenge because the policy encompassed zoning and code enforcement. Victoria needed 3 versions to ensure we covered all potential conflicts of interest. The policy went public the day Adrian Keller received our court-approved protective order. 45 households might stay in their houses since the injunction prohibited mass evictions during the criminal probe. Adrian brilliantly linked the threatening evictions to the election and witness tampering. The judge decided that tenants shouldn't lose their homes during landlord investigations. Grandfather's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. Depending on the findings, the protective order could last 8 months or more. After 3 weeks, the court dismissed most of grandfather's slander allegations against us. Political speech was protected, and grandfather hadn't shown malice in our words, the judge wrote. Victoria called it a major triumph, despite months-long procedural hurdles. She indicated that grandfather will pay our legal bills since he lost the major claims. His lawyers would utilize the remaining difficulties as paperwork to salvage face. Even though the conflict was ongoing, we won the legal battle. Lucas was suspended from grandfather's company that week for performance difficulties. He worked there for 9 years with flawless reviews before becoming our investigation source. His attitude and commitment to the company were vaguely noted in the suspension letter. Just hours after the news spread, our community rallied behind him. People started delivering groceries to his flat, and a rent fund was formed. 3 local firms soon offered him positions, including a better position with a housing justice charity. After joining the organization, Lucas became more determined to expose grandfather's corruption. His suspension was a complete failure and allowed him to talk about what he saw. Grandfather met me in the City Hall parking lot after a transition meeting a month before my swearing in. He looked older than ever in his fancy coat alongside my car. He ordered me to stop the circus and consider the family name. He spoke calmly but shook his hands about our family's reputation being ruined. He was standing in his $1,000 shoes, and I remembered Mom crying during chemo. I told him the family ended when he hung up on me when I cried for help. I passed him on my way to my car without glancing back while he stood alone in the empty parking lot. We held the swearing in at Jefferson Elementary instead of City Hall to make it accessible. Hundreds of supporters, including all Mom's cancer caregivers, crowded the gymnasium. Because she persisted on bringing food, our elderly neighbor sat in the front row with her casserole dish. The free car fixing mechanics and Mom's hairdresser stood together. The lunch lady took my younger brother's class to the event. Even the corner business owner closed for an hour to join us. Simple service replaced celebration and extravagant remarks in the wedding. The Emergency Housing Stabilization Task Force executive order was my first move as mayor after taking the oath. Nina Calder and other residents threatened with eviction led it during the campaign. The task force could investigate retaliation and suggest immediate renter protections. We gave them a budget and staff to make improvements, not just write reports. They began promptly analyzing all evictions from the past year for retaliation. Mom had her latest cancer center scans 2 days later, trying not to think about grandfather owning the facility. The results showed she was in perfect remission with no cancer symptoms. She shed delighted tears in the workplace as I held her hand and praised every authority. That afternoon, she decided to deliberately push for community healthcare access. She joined Thomas's group but pledged to be healthy and not overdo it. She first met survivors by listening to their treatment battle experiences. 4 days after that discussion, a Regional Health Foundation employee called my office to ask about the burning community center. She said they had a new grant program for towns with healthcare access concerns and would match our local fundraising. However, the community, not the city or corporate developers, had to oversee rebuilding. I convened Nina and other center volunteers for an emergency meeting. We spent 5 hours on butcher paper planning every program we wanted to bring back and developing new ones based on demand. The foundation representative attended our next meeting and saw 55 people present new center concepts. A single mom noted how the former center's daycare let her keep her employment while she took notes. Diabetic teen showed her insulin storage issues at school the center helped with. The foundation provided $2.5 million in matching money immediately if we established a decision-making community board. Sitting in my new workplace, I stare at my desk full of documents. Through shell corporations, grandfather owns half downtown buildings. The arson investigation continues, but Eric believes these cases take years to pursue. The 45 families are protected, but court orders won't last forever. Interviewing architects who understand community-driven design begins tomorrow. However, those families sleep without eviction notices tonight. That's something. Falsely accused by my ex, I lost everything. Expelled and isolated, I fled, changed my name, and rebuilt my life in a foreign country. My ex-girlfriend cheated on me. When I discovered out and confronted her, she panicked and told practically everyone we knew that I had raped her in order to cover up her infidelity. I was detained during the investigation but was freed owing to a lack of proof. My parents had already shunned me, and the majority of my friends had withdrawn themselves. My parents believed I was a rapist who had just gotten lucky, even though I hadn't been proven innocent by a jury yet. My best friend discreetly assisted me behind my parents' backs, and I ran away. I had nothing to lose, no one liked or approached me, and my college prevented me from attending classes. They simply provided me with assignments via email and let me come in for tests. I moved as far away from the town as I could and found an apartment. After working several community jobs to save money, I was able to stabilize myself. At some point, I decided to change my name. I'm not sure why, I just couldn't handle looking at it anymore. This helped me start over. When I re-enrolled in university, I met a few new people, but I had no idea why I was doing it. I was deeply in debt and struggling financially. I somehow completed my teaching degree and relocated to a country on the other side of the planet, where I currently reside. I obtained a great apartment and settled into my new work. Eventually, I met the woman who would become my wife. At first, I couldn't believe her. I flinched any time she attempted to touch me. I fidgeted when she came too close. But she was really patient. Then I went head over heels for her. Eventually, she gave birth to our twin daughters and son. I adore them above all else and would go to any length to keep them safe. Given that I was a foreigner and had not previously been trusted, her family welcomed me fairly quickly. They treated me well, and for the first time in years, I remembered how it felt to be part of a loving family. Now, I live in a lovely home with my wife and children. We're happy. That is, until last night. I was playing PlayStation with my kid while my wife and daughter were in the yard. A knock on the door. My father was standing right there. He offered me a feeble smile and began speaking. But I slammed the door so forcefully that it startled my son. I quickly took him to his room and contacted my wife, requesting that she put our daughter to bed. She was freaking out, as was I. My father kept knocking. I broke down. My wife consoled me, then answered the door. She wanted to know who he was. He stated he was my dad. I had just given my wife a general overview of my past. She had nothing but pain for me, but when she saw him, she became enraged. Understandably so. She screamed at him for abandoning her. After she calmed down, I told her to let him in and stay with the kids while I spoke with him. He explained that he had been assisting my ex clean out her phone. While searching through her texts, he discovered a chat between her and the guy she had cheated with. She apologized for wrecking my life. She said that she wished to take it back. My father didn't address her because he wasn't ready to reopen the wound, but, quietly, he began hunting for me, determined to convince me that he finally believed me. I'm not even sure how he found me. But I don't mind, he's here now. Now I don't know what to do. I've been roaming aimlessly, considering my alternatives. I've come up with two options, but I'm not sure which is the proper one. Turn him away. Tell him to return to our nation and leave me alone. Reconcile with him and inform my mother. If there is a better choice, I'd love to learn about it, because I'm utterly clueless right now. I'm stressed out here, and I'm going to take the day off work tomorrow. My father is living at a nearby apartment, so I'll probably go to him with my response. Thank you in advance. Comments Gentius. He claimed he was doing your ex-girlfriend a favor by deleting certain stuff from her phone. Doesn't that seem odd? Why would he continue contact her? Why would he look through her phone? People who are genuinely attempting to help do not break into phones. This is an enormous red flag. The man disowned you, maintains contact with the lady who devastated your life, discovered the truth through snooping, and then tracked you across the globe? Are you truly prepared to invite this instability into your family? T23454, you're correct. Nothing truly adds up. It's a messy issue, and I despise being put in this position. I'm fighting to find the perfect words to speak to him. Random Questioners Master, Advice Giver 26. Oh honey, this was so upsetting to hear. False charges should be prosecuted and imprisoned. They destroy people's lives. This whole situation is completely ludicrous. The best advice I can provide you? Keep him out of your life. He was so quick to dismiss you without even having a proper conversation. And honestly, you're happy even without them. Of course, you can forgive anybody you want, but I couldn't help but question what his true motivation is for attempting to reconcile now. Good luck, and thank you for sharing your story. T23454, OP. Thank you. To be honest, I just want to use the eye for an eye method and keep him away from my family. I'm not a forgiving person, and looking back, he must deal with the repercussions of his actions. Ballistic Pineapple. This is my first time commenting, so I can't say whether this is excellent advice. Honestly, only you can answer this. There is so lot to digest at once, and it has all been thrown upon you. I believe sending your father home would be the best option. It would allow you to decompress and gain a better understanding of what is happening. You can always contact him whenever you feel ready. However, being forced into this circumstance is not ideal right now. You have control over this. This is your life, and you get to pick how it unfolds. Take your time, consider everything, and make a decision when you are genuinely ready. T23454, OP. Yes, in the end, it will be my choice. I've accepted that much. My son asked me a few hours earlier who the man was. I couldn't bring myself to tell him that it was his grandfather. More information I know, it all depends on whether I want them in my life or not. I know I will never have all of my questions addressed. I guess I'm simply trying to make sense of everything, piecing together various responses from different people. Looking back, I'm still not sure why they abandoned me so quickly. Perhaps she fabricated certain texts. But, if that were the case, wouldn't she have reported them to the authorities? I remember them stating there was little to no proof to back up her assertions. None of this adds up. And frankly, I don't want to connect the dots. Sometimes it all seems like a bad dream. Thanks nonetheless, I'll figure it out eventually. Update 1. Hello, everyone, I apologize for not posting recently. I've decided that I will not reconcile with my father. I simply cannot find it within myself to forgive him. For those who wanted the details, here's what happened. The day following my last post, I went to see my father at his hotel. I informed him that I would not be reconciling with him, at all. He had tears in his eyes, but replied he understood. He told me that he had notified my mother about everything and had entirely shut my ex-girlfriend out of the family. Since several of you had asked, I addressed him about why he was still in contact with her in the first place. He stated she felt too sorry to leave us. Honestly, I don't believe that for 1 second. However, it makes little difference at this stage. Apparently, my mother did not take the news well. She asked for my phone number, but my father refused to give it to her. I'm not sure how much of what he said is true. To be honest, I believe most of it is an attempt to entice me back into their lives. But what happened after they threw me out onto the streets like a crazed dog? It makes me sick. My son eventually asked who was at the door. I informed him it was a colleague. When my children are older and we are facing difficult times, I will tell them the truth about my history. Everything is okay right now. This circumstance has shaken me quite a little, but I hope my father keeps his promise and leaves my new life alone. If anything else happens, I will keep you posted. But for now, I consider this to be resolved. Thank you so much for your support and good remarks. And please, if you know someone going through what I did, be there for them. Do not toss them away. Stay by their side. Even if they have to travel across the globe to find serenity. Update 2. I was living quietly till my father discovered me. What about that one event? It sparked off a chain reaction that resulted in this post. Recently, my family betrayed a vow. It made me furious. After much deliberation, I concluded I needed to confront them, directly. I flew back to my native country and met with everyone concerned. My mother. My father. My brother. Even the woman who accused me. I was nervous. What's the strangest part? I realized I no longer saw them as family. I recognized them, of course. But I didn't feel anything for them, as I do for my wife, children, and in-laws. My mother began crying, attempting to apologize. But I felt disgusted. My father soothed her. My brother maintained his coolness and opened the conversation. He asked how I was doing. I replied by ordering him to cease the small talk. This meeting was on my terms. I made it plain that I was not seeking reconciliation. I just needed closure. I warned them that if they tried to chase me, I'd contact the cops. I questioned my parents' decision to forsake me despite the lack of evidence presented by the police. They stated that they made a hasty judgment and that seeing me in detention shattered their hearts. I called them out. They did not strive to protect me. They didn't even try to hear me out before shutting me off entirely. I inquired about a comment made in my initial post. Why was my father even looking through my accuser's phone? He stated she instructed him to remove unnecessary data from her phone. That's when he noticed the conversation logs with her buddies. My father has always been technologically savvy, so while it wasn't a satisfactory response, I accepted it. Then I turned to my brother. Why did you never try to contact me? He looked astonished and stated he did, but I ignored him. At first, I did not trust him. Then it turns out he was correct. My brother had attempted hundreds of times to contact me and even sent me money to help me get back on my feet. But I never received his messages. Why? My mother had disabled my contact information from all of our phone contracts. She paid for my brother's previous plan, so he had no idea I had never received a call or message from him. So, when I was at my lowest point, absolutely lost, I was cut off from one of the few people who wanted to help me. Then came the final encounter with my ex. I asked her one question. Why did you do it? She stated she was afraid of what would happen. She claimed she never stopped loving me, despite everything. She claimed that each therapy session made her feel even more awful because she knew her charge was false. She even said she hadn't dated anyone since, expecting I would return to her so she could apologize. As if "I'm sorry" could undo everything. But even that was ridiculous. My father had seen chat logs of her with 3 separate partners while I was away. My ex broke down in tears and attempted to touch my hand. She had the audacity to want another opportunity. I was infuriated. I took out my phone and began showing them hundreds of photos. Pictures of my children. Their milestones. Our family travels. This is their first day of school. My wife and I wrapped our arms around them. I looked her in the eyes and said, "This is what you could have had if you hadn't been so stupid." I told my parents, "This is what you missed out on because you refused to hear me out." For a single second, I questioned whether I had gone too far. Then I remembered what they had done to me. I hadn't gotten far enough. The aftermath not. Everything about my experience was unpleasant. I caught up with my former best friend and his family. They were pleased to see me, and I was glad for them. They took me in when everyone else had abandoned me. One day, I hope to travel to my home country and teach my children where half of their culture comes from. But I'll never let them near my so-called family. My only family is my wife, her family and my children. I'd say the visit went fairly well. Edit. About my brother. Several of you inquired about my brother. After some thought, I decided to let him fly over and meet his niece and nephew. I was hesitant at first because we were never particularly close growing up due to brotherly rivalry. I also don't use social media, so he could only have contacted me through my phone number. But by that point, I'd already changed it. He never got an opportunity to contact me. What about my ex? I've left it up to my family to decide whether they want to contact the authorities. If they were truly sorry, they would report her. It's beyond me now. I might hear from my brother about it, but really? I'm just content with the life I've created. Now that my past is entirely behind me, I can finally relax. Looked down on by my parents, I left to pursue art. When I shared my first project, my mom coldly asked, "When will you get a real job?" I, 25F, have always been the black sheep in my family. Emma, 28F, my older sister, has been the golden child since I can remember. Our parents, particularly our mother, have always favored her over me. It's been this way since we were children, and it's just gotten worse as we've grown up. Growing up, Emma was always the excellent student, the popular girl, and the one who excelled at everything she did. She captained the cheerleading squad, received all A's, and was even voted prom queen. Meanwhile, I struggled in school, had a narrow circle of friends, and preferred to spend time in the art room rather than attending social activities. Our parents never missed an opportunity to compare us. "Why can't you be more like Emma?" was a remark I heard far too frequently. They'd constantly praise her successes while scarcely mentioning mine. When I get a B on an exam, they'd wonder why it wasn't an A. When Emma received an A, they would throw a celebratory supper. This tendency persisted into our adult life. Emma attended an Ivy League college on scholarship, whereas I attended a state school to study art. Our parents were happy with Emma's choice but wary of mine. They continuously questioned my decision, asking if I was confident I could earn a life as an artist. I remember the day I told them about my college decision. We were sitting at the dinner table, and I had spent weeks working up the guts to announce my choice. When I eventually told them, my father's face plummeted and my mother looked like she was going to cry. Emma, of course, chipped in. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Art school isn't exactly known for job security." My parents agreed, and I felt my hopes crumble in front of my eyes. Despite their displeasure, I persisted with my decision. Those 4 years of college were among the best of my life. I finally felt like I belonged, surrounded by people who understood and valued creativity. I excelled in my academics, making the dean's list multiple times. However, when I shared these accomplishments with my family, they were met with lukewarm reception. "That's nice, dear," my mother would remark, immediately shifting the conversation to Emma's latest accomplishment. Emma secured a high-paying position at a famous law firm in the city following graduation. In contrast, I had difficulty finding my foothold. I worked several part-time jobs while attempting to establish myself as a freelance illustrator. Our parents were always interested in hearing about Emma's newest case or advancement, but when I mentioned my creative efforts, they shifted the subject. I recall a very unpleasant family meal around 6 months after graduation. Emma was visiting from the city, and our parents had cooked her favorite dish. The entire talk concentrated upon her recent court victory. My mother continued emphasizing how proud she was, and my father could not stop smiling. When I tried to tell my mom about a tiny drawing I had gotten for a local magazine, she interrupted me mid-sentence to ask Emma about her intentions to buy an apartment. The situation at home had become terrible. I was still living with our parents to save money, but the continual comparisons and subtle criticism were having a negative impact on my mental health. Emma had her own apartment in the city, paid for by our parents. Every time she came, it felt like a royal arrival. Our parents would spend days getting ready, cleaning the house, and cooking her favorite foods. When she walked in, everyone greeted her with embraces and joyful talk. In contrast, my presence was frequently treated as an afterthought. I attempted to tell them how I felt multiple times, but it never went well. They'd accuse me of jealousy over Emma's achievement or say I was overly sensitive. "We just want what's best for you," they'd say, which always sounded like, "We want you to be more like Emma." My entire life was impacted by the continuous comparisons. I began to question my decisions, abilities, and even my worth as a person. I couldn't get out of bed some days because I was overcome with emotions of inadequacy and failure. I began to retreat from my friends, feeling humiliated by my lack of achievement in comparison to my sister. Their criticism extended to my romantic relationships as well. My parents were unimpressed when I brought home my first serious boyfriend in college, who was also an art student. They spent the entire dinner questioning him about his future prospects and making thinly veiled remarks about the volatility of artistic careers. Meanwhile, when Emma returned home with her boyfriend, a law student from an affluent family, my parents almost pulled out the red carpet. Things came to a head last week. I had finally secured a large illustration commission for a children's book series. It wasn't a large salary, but it was a step in the right direction for me professionally. I was looking forward to sharing the news with my family at supper. As usual, the discourse focused on Emma's most recent accomplishments. She had recently won a major case at work and was being considered for a promotion. Our parents could not stop talking about how proud they were. When there was a lull in the discourse, I seized the opportunity. I told them about my illustration project, trying not to become too excited. My mother's response: "That's nice, dear, but don't you think it's time you got a real job? You're not getting any younger, you know." My father only nodded in agreement. I was crushed. I tried to explain that this was a legitimate position that may lead to other opportunities in the future, but they wouldn't listen. Emma stepped in, suggesting she could definitely find me an entry-level work at her law firm if I wanted a steady job. That was the final straw. I rose up, my chair grinding loudly on the floor. I told them I was weary of being regarded like a disappointment, and that I was proud of my work and decisions. I said I couldn't live in a home where I was continuously made to feel inferior. My parents looked stunned. My mother began to say something about how I was being unduly sensitive, but I interrupted her. I informed them that I was moving out. That I'd rather struggle on my own than deal with their incessant criticism. Emma tried to be a peacemaker by advising me to calm down and not make rash judgments. But I could see a smug expression in her eyes. She was loving it, being the ideal daughter while I was the family disappointment. I stormed up to my room and began packing. My parents and Emma followed, attempting to talk me out of it, but their comments only reaffirmed what I already knew. They considered me as a failure and a burden. My mother even had the audacity to remark, "If you leave now, don't expect us to help you when you can't make rent." As I stuffed items into a suitcase, memories flooded my head. When I won a local art competition in high school, my parents didn't attend the award ceremony since it coincided with one of Emma's debating competitions. The numerous times they'd introduced Emma as our daughter, the lawyer, and me as simply our other daughter. They looked disappointed when I picked art school over the business program they wanted me to attend. That night, I fled with whatever I could put into my car. As I drove away, I noticed my parents and Emma standing in the doorway. My mother was crying. My father appeared angry. And Emma only looked smug. I felt a variety of feelings, including sadness, rage, and fear. There is also an odd sensation of relief. I'm currently staying with a friend while I decide out my future move. I knew leaving was a bold step, but I couldn't handle it anymore. Am I overreacting? Should I have stayed and attempted to help them understand? Or was quitting the correct decision? I feel lost and alone, but also relieved to be free of that harmful surroundings. The prospect of creating a life on my own terms is both thrilling and terrifying. I'm concerned about my financial situation, but I'm also excited to pursue my art without the constant criticism and comparisons. Any advice or help would be greatly appreciated. How do I proceed from here? How can I create a life for myself while dealing with the emotional consequences of leaving my family? And, most importantly, how can I start believing in myself after years of being told I'm not good enough? Update 1. It's been over 2 months since I left my parents' house, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give you all an update and thank you for your encouragement and ideas. Your warm words and encouragement have become a lifeline during this difficult time. After I departed, I spent a week sleeping on a friend's couch while I searched for a more permanent option. It was difficult, but I was able to find a little studio apartment that I could just barely afford with my savings and the proceeds from my illustration project. It's not much, but it is mine. And for the first time in my life, I believe I have my own space. The first several weeks were difficult. I pushed myself into my work, determined to show to myself, and perhaps to my family, that I could succeed on my own. I took on a part-time job at a neighborhood coffee shop to augment my income from illustration employment. Between the 2 jobs, I was working virtually constantly, but it felt fantastic to be self-sustaining. There were times when I came home fatigued, my hands aching from hours of drawing and pouring lattes, and I wondered if I had made the right decision. The small voice in my head, which sounded eerily like my mother, would tell me that I was dumb for believing I could make it as an artist. But then I'd look at the illustrations I was working on and recall why I'd chosen this path. My parents tried to contact me multiple times, but I was not ready to speak with them. I needed time to comprehend things and focus on getting on my own 2 feet. Their voicemails ranged from violent demands that I return home to emotional pleas wondering whether I was all right. It was difficult to ignore them, but I knew I needed time to think things out for myself. Emma also called several times, always in the same patronizing tone, telling me I was acting childishly and that I should come home and apologize. Her words wounded, but they also fueled my will to succeed on my own terms. About a month after I departed, something unexpected occurred. The children's book I illustrated was released, and it began to gain traction. The author shared it on social media, and it piqued the interest of a few prominent parenting bloggers. Suddenly, I began receiving emails from publishers interested in my work. I recall sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my computer screen in disbelief as the emails arrived. For the first time, I felt as if my dreams were more than just that. I sobbed that night, but they were tears of happiness and relief. I got 2 additional book deals in quick succession. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to allow me to leave my coffee shop job and pursue illustration full-time. For the first time, I felt as though my career was taking off. This newfound achievement provided a lift in confidence. I began to believe in myself and my abilities in a manner I had never done before. I learned I didn't need my family's approval to legitimize my decisions or my worth. Emma unexpectedly arrived at my residence about this time. She stated she was concerned about me and that our parents were furious. I invited her in, more out of courtesy than anything else. At first, she was genuinely interested in how I was doing. She looked about my small apartment and inquired about my job. I showed her the published book and informed her of the new projects. For a brief time, I wondered whether she now saw me as an equal. But then she started using the same old rhetoric. She stated that, while it was good that I had some success, it was not a steady career. She mentioned how scared our parents were, and how they only wanted what was best for me. She also mentioned, again, that she could find me a position at her law firm. As she spoke, I felt a familiar sense of inadequacy seeping in. Something was different this time, though. I felt a sense of accomplishment as I looked at my work on my desk and considered the emails from publishers in my inbox. I lost my patience. I told her everything was good and that I was happier than I had ever been. I pointed out that, for the first time, I was fully reliant on my own efforts, with no assistance from our parents. I questioned if she could say the same, given that our parents were still paying for her apartment. Emma's face transformed. The veneer of concern fell away, revealing the same arrogant, superior grin I had seen the night I left. She snapped at me, calling me ungrateful and selfish. She told me that I was breaking our parents' hearts and should be ashamed of myself. I asked her to go. As she was leaving, she turned and said, "Don't come crying to us if this little art phase of yours fails. We won't be there to bail you out." After she went, I felt both terrified and strangely empowered. I realized I no longer needed their approval. I was succeeding on my own, doing what I like, and that was enough. The interaction with Emma prompted me to think on our friendship over the years. I remembered how close we were as kids, before competition and comparisons drove us away. I felt a twinge of grief for the sisterhood we had lost. However, I knew that I couldn't keep holding on to that romanticized vision of our relationship. In the weeks that followed, I refocused on my work. I began connecting with other painters and illustrators, forming a network of like-minded creatives. For the first time, I felt as if I belonged to a group that understood and valued me. I also began therapy to work through the years of emotional baggage I had been carrying. It's been difficult, but it's helped me realize my worth beyond my family's expectations or my professional achievement. I'm still not ready to speak with my parents, but I feel stronger now. I'm focusing on my work and creating a life that makes me happy. It isn't always easy, but it's worthwhile. There are still days when I doubt myself and miss my family, despite everything. But then I look at what I've accomplished in 2 months on my own and I'm proud. I'm learning to be my own cheerleader, celebrating my accomplishments without the need for affirmation from others. Thank you again for your support. It means more than you realize. To anyone else going through similar difficulties, please know that you are not alone. It is acceptable to pick yourself, pursue your interests, and define success on your own terms. Update 2. It's been about a year since my previous update, and I can't believe how much has changed. I'd want to convey what has happened and thank you all again for your ongoing support during this trip. My illustration career has taken off. The children's book series on which I worked proved to be fairly successful, and I've subsequently illustrated several more volumes. I've recently started accepting commissions for magazine covers and a few advertising campaigns. It has been a lot of effort, but I am enjoying every minute of it. About 6 months ago, I moved into a bigger apartment. It's still not large, but it has enough room for a real art studio. Being able to divide my work and residential rooms has greatly improved my productivity and mental health. The day I moved in, standing in the midst of my studio, surrounded by blank canvases and the scent of fresh paint, I felt a sense of success and possibilities that I had never known. My confidence has increased alongside my career. I've been asked to talk at a few local schools about jobs in illustration, and I've even begun mentoring a few young artists. It feels weird to be able to inspire people when not long ago, I was questioning my own decisions. Now onto the familial drama. A few months after my last post, my mother phoned me unexpectedly. She cried and asked if we could meet. I was skeptical, but eventually agreed to meet her for coffee. My therapist had been encouraging me to set boundaries and concentrate on rebuilding my connection with my family, so I saw this as a chance to begin the process. When we met, she appeared fatigued and angry. She began by apologizing for the way they had treated me. She stated that after I departed, they had plenty of time to think on their behavior. She admitted that they had treated me unfairly and regretted constantly comparing me to Emma. Her words were exactly what I had hoped to hear for years. But I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to accept her apology and run into her arms like a small kid. Another part of me was skeptical, wondering whether this was again another attempt to force me to conform to their expectations. She then revealed a bombshell. Emma was sacked from her position at the legal firm. Apparently, she was misrepresenting her billable hours and overcharging customers. The company found out and fired her right away. I was shocked. The golden child, the ideal daughter, had fallen from grace. I felt a range of feelings, including surprise, perverse delight, and, weirdly, concern for my sister. But that was not all. Emma had been living way beyond her means, relying on our parents to cover her expenses. When she lost her employment, she struggled to meet her costs. She had accumulated a large amount of credit card debt and was facing eviction from her residence. My parents tried to help her, but the situation was severe. They had already exhausted a large chunk of their savings attempting to keep Emma afloat. My mother broke down as she told me this, stating they felt deceived and had no idea what to do. As I listened to my mother, I realized how much pressure Emma must have felt all these years. Always needing to be flawless, always trying to meet our parents' expectations. In a way, I felt bad for her. My mother asked if I would consider coming home for dinner to discuss matters as a family. I felt conflicted, but I consented. I felt emotionally stronger and more capable of dealing with it now. The family supper was strained. Emma was there, and she didn't look like the polished, confident lady I recalled. She was protective and angry, lashing out at everybody. She claimed that our parents did not provide adequate support for her and that I had abandoned the family. I remained cool and stood firm. I informed them about my accomplishments, how I had established a job and a life for myself without their assistance. Our parents listened with expressions of pride and remorse on their faces. Emma rushed out midway through dinner. My parents were devastated when she departed. They apologized again for how they had treated me and expressed their pride in my accomplishments. They asked if I'd consider returning home. I told them that while I appreciated their apology, I was not interested in returning. I had created a life for myself and was content with it. However, I expressed my willingness to improve on our relationship and spend more time together. Since then, things have progressively improved. My parents and I now chat on a daily basis, and they have even paid me a visit in my new apartment. They inquire about my job and are genuinely interested. It's unusual to have them genuinely listen to me and be proud of my accomplishments. Emma, on the other hand, has cut off communication with all of us. Last I heard, she had relocated to another place to start afresh. I've tried contacting her several times, but she has not responded. I hope she's doing well and can discover her own path, free of the strain of being the perfect child. The entire experience has taught me a lot. I've learned about family relationships, self-worth, and the value of pursuing your own path. I've understood that success isn't about meeting others' expectations, but about being true to yourself and doing what makes you happy. I've also learned the importance of forgiving. It has not been easy, but I am working on forgiving my parents and Emma, not for their sakes, but for my own peace of mind. I've discovered that harboring hatred and resentment only harms me in the long run. My relationship with my parents is still in process. Sometimes old tendencies emerge, and I have to remind them, and myself, that things have changed. However, we are making progress in the right way. They are beginning to respect me for who I am, rather than who they wanted me to be. What about my career? It continues to thrive. I was just requested to illustrate a comic novel, which is a dream come true. I'm also thinking about teaching a course at a nearby community college, sharing my knowledge and experiences with those who are interested in art. Looking back over the last year, I'm shocked at how much has changed. There were times when I questioned myself, wondering if I'd made the correct decision in leaving. However, I now see it was the smartest decision I could have done. It forced me to stand on my own 2 feet and believe in myself when no one else would. Stay strong if you're dealing with comparable familial troubles. Stand up for yourself. Follow your passions. Also, don't let someone make you feel less than you are. You never know how things will turn out. Success and happiness can take many shapes, and the path to achieving them isn't always the one chosen for you. Family dynamics can be complex, and healing takes time. Be patient with yourself and others. Set limits as needed, but be willing to reconcile if it feels right. Most importantly, remember this. You are valuable, regardless of your family's approval or anyone else's expectations. I'm grateful for this community and the encouragement you've given me during this journey. Your encouragement has meant more than you realize. Thank you for being there for me during the difficult times, and for celebrating my wins alongside me. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. I feel like I'm finally living life on my own terms, pursuing my passions and developing important relationships. It isn't always easy, but it's genuine and rewarding in a manner I've never felt before. Thank you all again for your unwavering support throughout this journey. It means everything to me. Here's to pursuing our aspirations, healing old hurts, and creating the life we want. My mother wanted me to cancel my wedding to avoid hurting my sister, who was abandoned before hers. I refused and didn't invite them. I'm a 30-year-old woman, correct? And I've been quite excited because I'm arranging my wedding with my boyfriend, who is now my fiancé. We've been preparing this big day for almost a year, and we wanted to make sure we had everything booked well ahead of time. Why? Because we chose a specific date in December for our wedding, and it falls right in the heart of the Christmas season, when everything gets really hectic. Here's where things become tough. My mother isn't exactly delighted with my wedding preparations. Why? My sister was set to marry a few months ago, but her fiancé abandoned her right before the altar, which is kind of terrible. Yes, there was a massive mess, and she was really upset. My mother believes that holding a wedding so soon after the accident will be extremely difficult for my sister and may hurt her sentiments. First and foremost, my wedding isn't particularly fancy or extravagant. My fiancé and I prefer to keep things simple. We don't overspend on things we don't need. Our wedding is not too expensive. We're only inviting roughly 50 guests, including our closest friends and family. We are not throwing a big pre-wedding celebration or a wild bachelorette bash. It is simply just the wedding ceremony followed by a pleasant, modest meal. Another factor is that my fiancé and I planned our wedding long before my sister considered getting married again. We didn't make this decision on a whim. Everyone in the family, even my mother and sister, knew what we were going for in December. So we're not being insensitive or anything. But, for some reason, just as things appeared to be going smoothly, my mother and sister decided to make a huge issue about it. It's very frustrating because it appears that they're turning this pleasant occasion into a drama. My sister is 3 years older than I, and this would have been her second marriage. Her first relationship ended very calmly. They simply drifted apart after 2 years and chose to split. She has been single since then. So, last Christmas, just when everything was bright and merry, my fiancé proposed to me, and it was beautiful. We had planned a summer wedding, but my fiancé was assigned a short-term trip overseas, so we had to postpone our preparations until December. Since then, we've been planning it in stages. I hate to admit it, but I believe my sister hastened into a second marriage because of me. When we announced our wedding last year, she had only recently begun dating him. They hadn't planned a wedding yet, but I found out a few weeks later that they were getting married. It sounded odd to me, marrying someone after only a few months of knowing them. Out of concern, I asked her whether she was sure about this guy, because marriage is a major deal for me. She became defensive, claiming that not everyone is capable of developing a lasting relationship. It was a really snarky comment, but I let it go. She's never had a steady relationship. I believe the longest relationship she had lasted a year, with the man she married first and then divorced after 2 years. I'm not saying that a year isn't enough time to get to know your partner, but after a broken marriage, one should proceed with caution. She had only known this guy for about 5 or 6 months, but she was ready for another wedding. Anyway, that was her decision, and I respected it and did not intervene further. They had planned an intimate church wedding with only a few guests. I believe it was less than 20. There were just 3 persons from the groom's side on the guest list. He said that his parents resided in a foreign nation and would be unable to attend on such short notice. So, from his perspective, there were 2 buddies and 1 colleague. I believe it was his manager. Nevertheless, I am not certain. However, none of them, including the groom, attended the wedding. We remained waiting at the church. My sister and dad repeatedly called him, but he did not show up. Later, he texted her and said he couldn't marry her since he wasn't sure yet. My sister tried to calm him down and advised that they continue their relationship and then decide on marriage. But he ignored her. That dude was in his early 20s, less than 25. Again, I'm not generalizing, but you know how the early 20s are, especially for Generation Z. I don't think anyone wants to settle down at this age, especially after only a few months of dating. Since then, my sister has been bitter toward me. No, I did not do any of those "I told you so" things, but I believe she blames me for jeopardizing her plans. Being stood up at your wedding is the worst thing that can happen to anyone, and I consoled her afterwards. She requested to be left alone with her friends and mother. Except for her friends and her mother, I was the only other person in the room. It was amusing though, she might have just asked me to leave. I felt terrible about it, but I left without saying anything. I wasn't feeling well, but I recognized it must be humiliating for her, and she had no idea how to respond. I contacted her after a week to check on her, but she did not answer. I texted, but it was left unread, so I didn't bother again. A few months later, I met her at Mom's house. I asked her how she was doing, and she said, "Why are you treating me as if I'm destitute and abandoned by a man? I don't need a man. I'm happy and complete just being myself." I said, "Sure, I was just checking on you. You see, I'm not making up these assumptions." She wasn't giving me cold shoulders after her wedding was put off. Last week, we sent out wedding invites. My sister called me. I assumed it was to congratulate me, or something. But she was like, "So, you're getting married in this outdoor venue?" I answered, "Yes." She said, "Cool," and then hung up. I was baffled until I received a call from my mother the following evening. She urged me to tone down the wedding since it was upsetting my sister. Toning down means canceling the venue and marrying at a church or at the registrar's office with 36 individuals on both sides. I informed her that we had been planning this for over a year and that she was well aware of the plan. So why would she suddenly have an issue with it? She said that it was because my sister had been standing up at the altar, and it would be inappropriate for me to have such a grandiose wedding within a few months. I told her that we had already paid for the majority of the wedding expenses, including the venue, food, and decorations. Not only had we paid the minimum booking amount, but nearly 60% of it. I tried to make her understand that modifying the plan would result in a tremendous loss. Canceling the venue would result in a significant financial loss for us. All booking fees for the venue, decorations, and caterers are non-refundable. Hearing me moan about the loss, she urged that I cancel the wedding. I was at a loss for words. How could she ask me to cancel the wedding? She stated, "Actually, that is the better way to respect your sister's feelings. She would have enough time to recover from her ordeal." She suggested we move our wedding to next summer. I informed her that we had already postponed it for work reasons and could not do it again. She tried to gaslight me by claiming that if I could do it for my fiancé, I should do it again for my sister if I loved her. This made my blood boil. I assured her that I was not going to cancel anything and that the wedding would proceed as scheduled. She hung up on me. I discussed this with my fiancé, and he believes my sister is overly distraught by her position. It must be difficult for her to believe that everything is okay for me while her life is a shambles. He stated it was fine if I wanted a low-key wedding. Discussing this with my fiancé has made things worse for me because I now believe he is more sympathetic to my sister. It makes me feel like a jerk for not considering her feelings. Until recently, I had thought my mother's request to cancel or modify the wedding preparations was absurd. But now I'm questioning if I should do it. I do not know, guys. Have any of you been in a similar situation? I'd love to have a new take on this. Update 1. Hello everyone, and thank you for participating with me in the comments. It was quite helpful to me. One of the comments, probably many of you, suggested that my mother is narcissistic for asking me to adjust my wedding plans simply because it will harm my sister. I understand you are correct. It was quite cruel. I'm not doing anything to injure my sister. If she truly loved me, she would not feel this way. There's no other way to phrase it. She's wounded because she's jealous of me. That is it. And it is not my problem at all. Some of you inquired about my family dynamics, namely whether my mother has always been as apathetic to me and my sister has always been narcissistic. So, the answer is no. Growing up, I never felt that my mother was biased toward my sister. Obviously, every parent has a favorite child unconsciously, but she never made it clear. Yeah, I used to grumble that mom liked my sister more, but she was never harsh or evil toward me. My sister and I had a fairly regular sibling bond in our early days. However, during our adolescence, we grew apart. It wasn't due to fighting or anything like that, we simply matured into completely different people. She was more homely and spent time with mom and our aunts, making small chat. I was never interested in any of that. Instead of spending time with family members, I concentrated on my schoolwork, applying for scholarships, and socializing with friends. I also moved out really early. When I was 18, I enrolled at a college far from home, and I've been living alone ever since. Meanwhile, my sister lived with my parents until she turned 25. She only moved out once she married her first spouse. Even yet, her husband's house was only a few miles away, so she spent every other weekend at mom's place. Dad died 5 years ago, and since then, my sister has moved back in with mom. So, yes, they have spent a lot more time together than I have. Naturally, their link is stronger than the one I have with my mother. Nothing much has happened since my last post. Actually, I'm avoiding any talks with them. I'm not going to visit or call them. My fiancé inquired whether I was contemplating my mother's plea to postpone the wedding. I said no. The wedding would go as planned. I'll provide an update if anything changes. Update 2. I hate to admit it, but my sister is a true narcissist, and mom has been supporting her evilness. So, my mother invited my fiancé and myself out to supper. I didn't feel very well about it. Before that invitation, she contacted me to inquire about the wedding preparations. When I gave her updates, I got the impression she wasn't even interested. It was more like, "Are you still doing that?" Then she interrupted me and asked, "Why don't you come home? We can sit and discuss." I was perplexed by the entire sit and talk thing, but she explained that she only meant a general catch-up. I refused to go since I didn't like how she treated me. But last week, she called my fiancé to formally ask us to supper. He asked if she had a special event or anything she wanted to discuss. But she replied there was nothing special, she just wanted to serve us some home-cooked meals. He couldn't refuse, so we had to comply. Before traveling there, I informed my fiancé that if mom or my sister requested that we cancel the wedding, or even make any changes, he should refuse. My fiancé is a soft-spoken gentleman who is easily taken away by the emotions of others. I advised him not to give in to their demands or make any promises. If such a circumstance came, he should remain silent and I would handle it. We went there and, thankfully, my sister wasn't present. Everything was going well until mom began discussing her wedding, how she and dad married at a registrar's office, followed by a simple lunch with both of their parents. She went on to explain how the money helped them set up their home and take care of other crucial matters. Then mom tried to manipulate my fiancé by suggesting that we have a long life ahead of us and shouldn't spend money on the wedding. I informed mom that we had previously planned a very low-cost wedding relative to our means. We both make decent money, but we live a very basic lifestyle. She went on to remark that it is our family tradition to have an intimate wedding because we are humble people who do not believe in bragging. I was like, wait a minute. My sister's first wedding was more than intimate. It had almost 100 attendees. Mom defended it, claiming it was the family's first wedding and dad wanted it that way. That day, I discovered how wicked my mother was. She began sobbing, expressing her gratitude that dad was able to organize and see at least one of his daughter's weddings. She went on about how much she misses him at all family gatherings. My fiancé hugged mom to comfort her. I motioned for him not to be taken away by her weeping. He was a little annoyed by my stiffness. My mother almost convinced him, and he said, "Sure, yeah, we'll take care of it. You don't care about things like that." My sister stepped in just then, and oh my God, her bitterness knows no bounds. She rushed to console mom, telling her that she would always be there for her and that, unlike others, she would respect and follow her decisions. Her snark pushed my buttons so hard that I couldn't hold back. I informed her that I had done nothing wrong, but they were targeting me in such a way. This resulted in a full-blown quarrel between us. She stated I should have canceled my wedding because my sister was going through such a difficult time in life. She accused me of being insensitive because I did not even tone down the pomp and show. She was personally criticizing me, but I said nothing negative. I was simply defending myself. But when she remarked it was ridiculous to spend so much money on one event, I returned it to her. I answered, "Yes, it is just one event. However, it is the most important day of my life. And, unlike others, I intend to have it once in my life." She quickly realized I was referring to her 2 weddings. I understand, it was cruel and mean. But, Guy, I was over her personal insults. For months, they've been calling me selfish and pretentious. I'm done being the good and bigger guy. I'm just finished. Now, I enjoy being the devil. If they actually cared about my happiness, they would not be upset to see me marry. They're just jealous of me. Not to mention that my statement made the situation worse, and my fiancé had to intercede and drag me out of the house. While departing, I exclaimed that the wedding would go forward as scheduled, and if there was a problem, they could skip it. That happened yesterday, and I'm still seething as I write this update. I'll tell you, you can deal with all the injustices in the world, but narcissism from your own family is the most difficult to deal with. Update 3. Thank you, everyone, for your support. I apologize for the rambling in my last update. I was filled with rage and didn't know how to express it. But thank you to everyone who messaged me and commented. That actually calmed me down. Okay, I've got quite an update this time. I am getting married next week, and we are proceeding with our original intentions. That is the good part. A lot has transpired since my last post, but thankfully, I have not lost my resolve. After that severe, I'd call it, fight with my sister and, to a lesser extent, with my mother, I was experiencing a range of emotions, from rage to heartbreak. I didn't communicate with my fiancé for a few days since I wasn't in a state to have a sensible conversation. He intended to make me see something, but all I could think about was how my sister couldn't take seeing me happy, and mom was side with her, completely ignoring my sentiments. My fiancé talked me through it after my fury faded. He proposed that we change the setting to a church and cut down on our family. He believed that my sister was most concerned about the extended family attending the wedding and discussing her shame at the altar. I was compelled to reduce the number of relatives because I was not particularly close to my aunts and uncles. But I truly wanted the venue. Meanwhile, I contacted my cousin, who, to be honest, is more of a gossip monger. I called her to see if my sister had spoken anything about the fight. And indeed, she did. My sister had spread rumors about me everywhere. She claimed that I humiliated and insulted her for her broken relationships. She absolutely exaggerated the entire story. Even if it was only my sister, I could understand. But my mother had also joined her side and had been disparaging me, calling me insensitive and arrogant. When I told my fiancé about this, he instantly got out of it. He was like, "Whatever you decide, I'm not getting into your family drama." So we're sticking with the original plan. A garden-themed wedding with 70 guests, as decided. My sister's narcissism is reaching new heights. She was sobbing in front of my aunts, telling them how insensitive I am and how I am hurting her sentiments by marrying in front of her. Now I don't understand her problem. I'm not marrying her fiancé or husband, why is she making such a fuss over it? I tried to console her. I urged her to feel happy for me. When this technique failed, she began encouraging everyone to boycott my wedding so that I may learn the importance of respecting the feelings of those close to me. When I found out about it, I emailed both of them and told them they were no longer invited to the wedding. I explained how they had been disparaging me and hurting my sentiments. I kept several important family members in the loop, including my godmother, aunt, and her husband, so that everyone knew my side of the tale. Following that email, I noticed the tables turning. I received multiple phone calls from various family members, including my godmother, assuring me that nothing was wrong. I have the right to have the wedding I want. Reservations were made months before, and everyone was aware of the arrangements well in advance. So what my mother and sister were doing was purely terrible. I have every right to exclude them from my wedding. My sister left me a lengthy voicemail, calling me a spoiled brat and arrogant for not respecting her feelings. She stated it was quite tough for her to move on. She had been abandoned by her fiancé during her wedding only a few months prior. Instead of comforting her, I was busy planning my own wedding and clawing her wounds. Then she cursed me. She predicted that I would face a similar fate, or worse. She claimed that my fiancé, or future husband, would leave me or cheat on me with other women. Only then, she explained, would I understand her anguish. All along, I had been supporting myself. I was firm about my decision. But hearing that crushed my heart. I couldn't believe my own sister could curse me like way, only a week before my wedding. The week leading up to the wedding is already an emotional roller coaster for any woman. And hearing this from my own older sister is the worst thing. People bless their siblings and children at weddings. But I am being cursed. I'm not sure what I did to earn this hate. My mother also replied to my email. She claimed she was disowning me. She advised me not to see her again since I didn't care about my family's feelings. This is how things stand so far. If anything more happens, I will provide an update on this topic. Otherwise, send me well wishes for the future. Update 4. Hello again, everyone. I'm here with another update on my wedding story. And what a whirlwind these past few weeks have been. I genuinely appreciate all of your help and guidance. It's been a huge support during these tough times. Following my last update, things took an unexpected turn. With the wedding just days away, my fiancé and I were determined to go ahead with our plans despite the constant family upheaval. Life, as they say, is what happens while you're busy making other plans. 2 days ago, my mother called me. I was afraid to respond, fearing additional requests or comments. But something in her speech took me off guard. It was remorse, which I had not heard from her in a long time. She asked if we might meet for coffee, just the two of us. Against my better judgment I consented, curious to hear what she had to say. We met in a quiet cafe, distant from the recollections of home. My mother, with tears in her eyes, handed me a letter. It came from my sister. In the letter, my sister admitted to being overcome by her own grief. She stated that her actions toward me were unjustified and motivated by her anguish. She apologized for the upheaval she caused and emphasized her desire for my happiness, even if she was still unable to attend the wedding. Then my mother spoke. She apologized for her involvement in everything. She revealed that her grief, over my sister's aborted wedding and the death of my father years before, had impaired her judgment. She told me she loved me and regretted asking me to cancel my wedding. While she couldn't change the past, she wanted to make amends and begged to be a part of my big day. I was stunned. The earnestness in their statements was evident, and it gave me something to think about. I spent the night discussing everything with my fiancé, who was supportive of any decision I made. After careful consideration, I decided to extend an olive branch. I called my sister and mother and told them they may attend the wedding if they felt like it. My sister, still overcome with grief, stated she wasn't prepared to attend. However, she thanked me and wished me a wonderful day. My mother, on the other hand, was grateful and vowed to respect our plans and support us on our special day. Everything is set for the wedding. We're sticking to our original plan, a garden-themed wedding for our closest friends and family. It feels good to move forward. Not only will we celebrate our love, but we will also take steps to mend our family. Thank you again for your words of support and wisdom. I'll make sure to keep you updated after the wedding, wishing us luck and bright skies. Update 5. Hello everyone. I'm back with what I think will be the most joyous update in this entire tale. Our wedding day has come and gone, and it was a celebration that not only represented the start of a new chapter with my husband, but also the mending of old scars in my family. Thank you all for your nice thoughts and useful advice along the process. Our wedding day began bright and clear, a wonderful December morning, with a sharp cold in the air, promising a lovely winter wedding. The garden site was converted into a magnificent setting with white and gold decorations, shimmering fairy lights draped around the trees, and brilliant winter flowers that provided a pop of color against the tranquil white backdrop. The wedding was small and intimate, attended by roughly 70 of our closest friends and family. As I walked down the aisle, my fiancé's face was filled with genuine love and excitement, which I will cherish for the rest of my life. Our vows were genuine and emotional, reflecting our journey together and the future we envisage. Throughout the exchange, there was hardly a dry eye. Even my usually reserved fiancé shed a few tears. Suddenly, midway through the reception, my mother took the microphone. My heart skipped a beat, expecting the reappearance of old frustrations. However, what followed was a genuine speech from her, in which she acknowledged previous mistakes and expressed her joy for us. She shared anecdotes from my childhood, which elicited gentle laughter from the audience. She ended by expressing how proud my father would have been to see this day. It was a significant healing experience for all of us. Later in the evening, the dance floor was open, and the atmosphere was charged with excitement. I danced with my mother, which I had not thought was possible a few months ago. We didn't say much, and we didn't need to. The dance conveyed it all. My friends and family mingled, danced, and celebrated, forming new happy memories. Although my sister was not present, her presence was felt through the beautiful bouquet she sent, along with a heartfelt message. I kept the flower near the family photos we exhibited to symbolize her role in the day. It was a heartbreaking reminder that healing takes time, and everyone's journey is unique. The reception offered a cozy, tasty winter-themed meal with comfort dishes that warmed everyone despite the cold weather. Our caterer did an excellent job presenting seasonal dishes, and the warm apple cider was a big success with the guests. As the evening came to a close, we launched lanterns into the sky, symbolizing the release of old grievances and the illumination of new aspirations and dreams. Watching them sail up into the starry sky, accompanied by cheers from our loved ones, was a magical way to close a wonderful day. Now, as we get back into our routine and think about our wedding, I'm filled with gratitude. This occasion was more than just the wedding of two people. It was about the reconciliation and healing of a family ripped apart by misunderstanding and pain. Moving forward, I wish to mend relationships and create a future filled with love and understanding. Thank you everyone again for your support and for keeping up with my posts. Your ideas and support have been a guiding light throughout difficult times, and I'm grateful for our group. As we travel on our honeymoon and future experiences, I carry not just my husband's affection, but also fresh relationships with my family. Here's to new beginnings, full of hope and excitement. My sister crashed my wedding but was arrested for kidnapping. Now that she is facing jail, my parents want me to help, but I refuse. So, I, 24F, got married about a week ago, and things went very wrong. Let me start from the beginning. I have an older sister named Stacy, 26F. We have always had a strong sibling rivalry, and I am serious about it. Growing up, we despised each other because we were always trying to outdo each other. We never got along, and as we grew older, we continued to despise each other. We were sure not to show others how much we loathed one another, but it was all there beneath the surface. When we were living together, she and I didn't talk to each other and simply put up a show for our family members when they visited. But even our parents realized we didn't like each other, and they never tried to make things right between us. In some ways, I believe that is what led to so many things going wrong in the end. But I will get to that later. She moved out when she was 18 to attend college, and I was relieved because it meant I could finally be myself around the house instead of continuously walking on eggshells because of her. She would only come back for the holidays and talk about how wonderful her life was since she was attending one of the greatest business schools in the state. I was a little jealous of her, but my sole goal was to work harder than her and get into a better place, which I achieved. I was accepted into an Ivy League school. That was a great slap in the face for her, and I was celebrated far more than she ever was. I expected that getting into an Ivy League institution would put a stop to our competition, but that did not happen. She suddenly revealed that she was beginning her own business. She completed the task with the assistance of my father. I'm not sure if it was luck or hard effort, but her firm took off a few years ago, and she relocated to Japan to expand the technological side of it. It was a huge success, and our parents were really proud of her. That was roughly 2 years ago. Since then, she has lived in Japan. Unfortunately, things didn't go so well for me once I finished college. The fact that Stacy was succeeding so much only exacerbated the situation. I had gotten a job, but it was nowhere as glamorous or rewarding as what she was doing. So I quit shortly after joining. That was a terrible mistake, and I know it now because I should have stayed there and worked my way up. But I was a fool for competing with my sister when I should have focused on myself and my work. It was a very stupid decision on my behalf, and I regret it. But it's finished now. After I quit my work, there was a period in which I waited for something to simply fall into my lap. When it didn't happen, I became depressed. It also didn't help that Stacy was excelling in her area, and her business was something my parents always brag about. I despised it, but I couldn't say anything without appearing resentful and jealous. Even though I was feeling both of these emotions, I had to disguise them when I met with my family and seemed to be pleased for Stacy, because anything other than happiness was an inappropriate emotion. That was about the time I met my spouse, Jackson, 25 million. I'm very pleased I did because meeting him transformed my life. It had been roughly 6 months since I had resigned from my work and had been hoping for a better opportunity to come along, but with no success. As I previously stated, I was deeply miserable and disappointed with my life. So I downloaded a dating application. I wasn't really searching for something serious, I just wanted to meet people and use it as a way to distract myself from how horrible things were going for me. I was trying to pay rent and buy basics for myself. I had to rely on my parents for money. They'd send me money every month. I also had some money saved from when I was working, but it wasn't enough, and I was struggling to pay my bills. My parents would bail me out, and I would promise them every month that I would return all of their money as soon as I could. I could always sense displeasure in their tones, which drove me insane because I knew I wasn't doing my best. It was really difficult for me to accept the fact that, at the time, Stacy was faring better than I was, and I was a tremendous disappointment to my parents. So I was utilizing dating apps and going on random dates with men I didn't even like, all to distract myself from my feelings. For a while, it worked. I went on a few dates over the course of many weeks with individuals who were solely interested in hooking up. It was basically casual. However, that changed after I paired with Jackson. He was an extremely interesting guy to talk to at first, and he checked all of my boxes. He had also received straight A's in school. But after graduating from high school, he attended culinary school and was working in a restaurant when we met 2 years ago. He was humorous, engaging, and had the perfect amount of machismo. But at the time, I assured him I wasn't seeking something serious. When he asked me out on a date after nearly 2 weeks of talking online, he said he was seeking something serious and did not want to be in a casual relationship. He was dating to marry. I appreciated how honest and open he was about his feelings, so I decided to give it a shot, not knowing what was in store for me. I went out with him after agreeing on a first date to see how things went. And it went extremely nicely. It felt like we'd known each other for years. I think it was the best date I've ever had. We had a great time, and with him, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything. That was the first time I'd ever felt that way around other people, so it was a refreshing change. Our talk flowed easily, and we just clicked. I'm not sure what changed, but I decided to give our relationship a proper shot. We went on several more dates. But after only 3 months together, I discovered that I was pregnant. At the time, all I was concerned about was how Jackson would react to it. Within the first few weeks of our relationship, he had learned almost everything he needed to know about me. I had told him everything about myself and my family, including how I had spent my entire childhood competing with and trying to outdo my sister. But being with him inspired me to be a better person, a person of my own. He already knew everything about me, and I believe I knew everything about him at that moment. In reality, he was the one who pushed me to get out of my depressive state and actively seek a job rather than waiting for something to come to me. So I ended up returning to my previous position at the company from which I had resigned. And I believe that was one of the best moves I've ever made. By the time I discovered I was pregnant, I had been working for over a month and things with Jackson were going well. I was just concerned about his reaction to the news. Most people would believe it was too soon and withdraw from the relationship because they were terrified. But deep inside, I genuinely wanted the baby. It simply felt perfect. I can't put it into words, but I just felt prepared to be a mother. To my surprise, when I told Jackson about my pregnancy, he was very supportive. He informed me that it was my body, therefore I could do anything I wanted, and that he would support me regardless of what I did. When I told him I wanted to keep the kid, no one was happier than him. He explained that he had wanted me to keep the baby because he believed he was also ready. Even though we were young and had only been together for 3 months, he told me he didn't want to seem insane or come across as overly powerful, so he left it up to me. But my decision had made him the happiest guy alive. We agreed that despite the fact that we were expecting a kid, we would wait to get to know each other better before marrying. It was decided. We pushed ahead with the pregnancy, and a few weeks later, we discovered that we were having twins. That was another huge surprise, but we dealt with it. He moved in with me soon after we learned about the pregnancy and introduced me to his parents around the same time. His parents were quite lovely, and they appeared to love all of their children equally, without ever pressuring them to compete with one another. It appeared to be a healthy family, and it was the first time I had seen how one worked because I had never experienced it firsthand. However, I was hesitant to introduce him to my family because I knew my parents wouldn't approve of my life choices. I was a talented student with a promising future, but I had opted to have children with a man I had only known for less than a year. I'd even moved in with him. Any parent would disapprove of this, and I knew my parents would probably lose their minds. So I kept putting it off until I started to show, at which point I realized there was no way to hide it. I organized a meeting with them when I was 4 months pregnant and decided to tell them everything. I invited them over to my house and had Jackson present for moral support. They knew I had been dating Jackson for a time, but they had no idea I had been living with him, or that I would soon be the mother of his children. When I informed them about it, I anticipated them to get angry and yell at me. But they responded in an unexpected way. They truly appeared to be delighted for me. They were overjoyed and hugged me, congratulating me on my pregnancy. And when I informed them I was having twins, my mother nearly collapsed with joy. It was an unexpected reaction, but I was relieved that they were not upset with me. In fact, once they found out, they threw me a party and proclaimed to everyone that they were about to become grandparents. I also informed them that Jackson and I did not want to marry solely because we were having children together. We wanted to live together for a while before making such a significant commitment. They were cool with it as well. They were incredibly supportive of everything, which surprised me, but in a positive way. I was really relieved that my parents were on my side in this, since I would have despised it if they had turned against me or attempted to change my mind about things. I even spoke with them about how supportive they were, and I stated that I had not expected that from them. They told me that they were aware that they had never truly been excellent parents since they had never stopped my sister and me from competing with one another throughout our childhood. They felt they were doing something nice. They believed that continually pushing us to achieve better would help us succeed. However, they understood that doing so may have harmed us in the long run. This epiphany occurred when they discovered that I had quit my work in order to pursue a better opportunity. They recognized that Stacy's success with her own business had influenced her decision. They realized that I wanted to accomplish something on my own to outdo Stacy. I thought it was strange that they knew about it, even though I had never mentioned it to them. However, they stated that as parents, they were aware of what was going on and felt responsible for it. They wanted me to know that whatever happened, they would be there for me. I didn't have to continually compete with Stacy to prove that I deserved their love and affection. They would always adore me, and they were equally proud of both of us because we had always given our all. That was the most important thing to them. It was a much-needed chat, and I'm glad I talked it out with my folks. It made things much simpler for me during the pregnancy and afterwards because I could openly ask my parents to help me with the kids while Jackson and I worked. They also informed me that they had a similar interaction with Stacy. However, it appears that things did not proceed as planned. She had just smiled and said she didn't need them to say such things because she truly thought I was a sore loser. In her opinion, I was having a breakdown, which is why my parents tried to be understanding by telling us that they were equally proud of both of us. But she understood the truth, and refused to believe that our parents were truly attempting to turn a new leaf and become better parents. She was persuaded that she was more deserving of their love since, by her own standards, she was performing better in life. My parents assured me that they would speak with her again when she returned for the holidays, because internet discussions were not the same. They promised me that they would have the same chat with her as they had with me, and she would finally stop trying to compete with me. Until that time, she had gone to great lengths to make me feel horrible. Since I revealed my pregnancy, she has been sending me backhanded compliments and making sarcastic remarks in the family group chat, completely inappropriate. She was clearly attempting to tear me down and make me feel awful about the pregnancy, even though I saw no reason to feel bad about it. To her, however, it was clearly a failure, a massive one. In her eyes, I was knocked up before marriage and living with a guy I had hardly met. So, for her, this was a big win. She assumed she could now say whatever she wanted to me without repercussions. It was really grating on my nerves, and I had considered leaving the group chat multiple times. But my parents persuaded me to stay since they were genuinely trying to be better parents and wanted us to stick together. So I stayed, for their sake. My parents pledged to put an end to this, or at least do their best. And if they couldn't, I could leave the group. When Stacy returned for Christmas, my parents informed me they were going to talk to her, and they did. Unfortunately, she was already too far gone by then. Her main purpose in life at the time was to humiliate me and make me feel as tiny as possible. She was intolerable that year. Even though she had been extremely unpleasant in the previous few years due to her thriving business, that year was far worse. Not only had she just returned from Japan, but she was also aware that I was pregnant and nowhere near her level of accomplishment and riches. She used every chance to remind everyone of this. She was constantly talking about herself, giving me stares, and even sarcastically asking if I was not happy for her. It was quite awkward and uncomfortable. I had to leave the party early because I was trying so hard not to lose my anger and cry in front of everyone. After the Christmas party, my parents attempted to contact Stacy again in the hopes that she would stop calling. Instead, she stated that she had worked hard to be where she is, and she would not allow me to take that away from her. She stated she had every right to brag about it as she pleased, and I would just have to deal with it. That was when I decided to cut ties with her. I exited the group chat, and my parents agreed that it was for the best. We hadn't communicated for 2 years, and I had no idea what she had been up to. But I recently learned from a couple of my relatives that she had returned from Japan, with a baby. I first heard about it around 4 weeks ago. Apparently, it was a miracle baby, who was just 2 months old. My parents told me that they had had multiple video chats with her before she returned, and they had never detected anything, not even the faintest indication that she was pregnant. She explained that she wanted it to be a surprise for everyone. She stated she had recently become a mother and had married in a secret ceremony only a year before. Now she was ready to discuss it. The timing was nothing short of suspect. Almost everyone in the family thought I was going to marry around the same time. But now, thanks to her, everyone is only talking about her marriage and daughter. She stated that her husband remained in Japan due to a heavy workload and was unable to make it. But she had returned with her daughter because she wanted her family to meet her. I couldn't let something like that bother me since I was getting married and it was meant to be a lovely time. So, even after she returned, I continued to avoid her. Unfortunately, it didn't matter because she managed to spoil my wedding. She showed up on my wedding day unannounced. Just after the ceremony, I noticed her among the guests. I nearly flipped out. But Jackson and my folks helped me relax. Apparently, she had snuck in, and making a disturbance would only play into her hands and make my wedding all about her. As long as she wasn't actively causing problems, we decided to let her stay and deal with it later. I was being married at Jackson's aunt's farmhouse, so security wasn't tight, which is how she got inside. Now I regret not spending enough money on security. If I had, we could have avoided a lot of problems. Throughout her time at the wedding, all she talked about was how fortunate she was to have her miracle baby, and how my children were illegitimate and did not count because I had them before marriage. It was quite insulting. She was saying that to everyone she met while attending my wedding. Later on, numerous visitors approached me and told me about it. I had to grin and let it go since I didn't want to argue with her and ruin my own wedding. It was quite challenging, but I managed to get through it. At one point, I nearly lost it. But, before I could say anything, the police attacked the venue. I had no idea what was happening. They sealed the entrances, and we were locked in within seconds. Then they arrested Stacy. It was really disorienting. A woman was screaming and crying while holding the baby that was meant to be my sister's, saying it was actually hers. After then, everything became a blur: statements, handcuffs, and uncertainty. It was not until much later that we realized what had transpired. The baby had never been Stacy's. Apparently, all of the photos she had shown us were taken from a friend's social media account. She'd photoshopped herself into them, like some sicko. And the worst part? All of the occasions she had met us with the kid, she had been babysitting for her friend. She had been living with a friend since she returned from Japan because she had terminated the lease on her own apartment and was seeking for a new place. So she was babysitting for free. That was why Mom had never invited our parents or relatives to see her. Then, on the day of my wedding, she decided to go too far. She attended my wedding without her friend's permission. She had gotten the baby out while her friend and her friend's husband were sleeping. She then refused to answer any subsequent calls. That's why her friends had to contact the cops and have her detained. Fortunately, she had been constantly discussing my wedding and how she wanted to take me down, so her pals had guessed where she would be. This is how they found her and arrested her. It was really ridiculous. I still can't believe what happened, but it did. My family and I are still fighting to cope with it. Thinking Stacy was a fierce competitor was one thing, but knowing that she was willing to go to such extreme, crazy lengths only to show our parents that she was better than me, that was extremely concerning. She is now pleading with her friends not to bring charges against her because she is well aware that she would not win this case. If charges are filed, she will face jail time. So far, nothing has happened, yet she blames me for everything. She thinks I was simply getting married to rub it in her face. Now, don't forget that I haven't spoken to her in almost 2 years. I haven't spoken to her since our previous conversation. And I was even polite enough to let her crash my wedding because I didn't want to cause a scene or shame her. She was the one who transformed my wedding into something nasty. If anything, I should be blaming her. So, when she contacted me yesterday and told me that I needed to convince her friends that I had pushed her to do something crazy, I told her precisely what I believed. I told her that I wished she would wind up in prison, because that is where she belongs. Either that or the psych facility, as she is mad. My parents, however, believe that I must assist her at this time. They want me to persuade her friends that she wasn't thinking straight, because I was tormenting her with news of my marriage and children. That way, they may not file charges against her and have her detained. So far, the matter has become slightly more problematic because she had been living with them and babysitting the infant. The police have yet to figure out what to do about it. They cannot proceed without her friend's permission. It would have been a clear case of kidnapping if she hadn't been living with them and actively caring for their infant while they were away. But that is not the situation here. That is why she has managed to stay out of jail, for the time being. She continued insisting that they had already agreed to her take the kid with her anytime she wanted. But there's no way to corroborate it yet, so she's not in big trouble. All we need to do is persuade them not to file charges. But I am not sure I want to do it. I don't believe she deserves any assistance from me, of all people. But my parents believe it would be bad of me to turn my back on her. So, am I a bad person for wanting my sister to go to jail? Update 1. Okay, I've chosen to cut connections with my entire family, including my parents. Yes, they were quite useful during my pregnancy and after the baby, but I'm done with them now. I believe I will require some time alone. Whether they are supportive or not is irrelevant to me right now. I simply want to be with my husband and children. Period. And I can't do it if I continue to get caught up in their drama. So I'm withdrawing myself from the issue since it's causing me mental distress. I am grateful to my parents for everything they did once I revealed my pregnancy. But really? I am so tired of everything. As for Stacy, I think it's clear why I don't want to aid her. She does not deserve my help. She dug her own grave so she could get out on her own. Jackson thinks I'm making the proper decision. Yes, that's it. Update 2. So, I recently heard from a couple of my family that Stacy is in serious difficulty. Her pals have officially chosen to seek charges and take this thing further. So far, Stacy has claimed that she has her friend's permission to take the kid whenever she wants. But that will be extremely tough to show in court. Given her behavior during the wedding and how she had been claiming the child as her own, I can't see how she can get out of this. It's upsetting, but really? I cannot say I am surprised. I'm also not speaking with my folks right now. And I don't think I will until they admit that what I did was correct, and that they apologize for asking me to help her. That's a lot to ask, but I don't want to speak with them until they understand how terribly they messed things up for Stacy and me as children. They must acknowledge that this is partly their fault. Update 3. Hi, so, Stacy is now on trial. We don't know what will happen to her yet, but if she is convicted, she may face up to 5 years in jail. She is mentally unstable, which could result in a lower sentence. Anyway, that isn't our business. Jackson and I are still going on our honeymoon. We're going to try to make amends for our horrible wedding. I can't ask my parents to babysit because we still don't communicate. So we'll have to ask Jackson's parents to watch our kids while we're gone. But it'll just be for 2 weeks, so it's not too long. I'm simply hoping my honeymoon is better than my wedding. And honestly, I have a feeling it will happen. Because this time, it will be just me and Jackson. My wife declared, "Plenty of men want me," so I walked away, giving her the freedom to pursue what she believed was better for her. In the midst of an argument, my wife stated, "Plenty of men want me." So I left her to those men to handle. I never expected it to go down like this. It all started with a dumb quarrel, one of those minor, daily things that you forget about later but seem like the world is ending when they happen. She'd been onto me about something small, as usual, something about not putting out the garbage on time or perhaps not answering her phone soon enough when she was out with her pals. It was no big thing. Except she'd been carrying a lot of frustration lately, and I was the only one around to vent it on. That is when she said it. "Plenty of men would want me." She spat the words out, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me, challenging me to respond. The words hung there, weighty and piercing, more cutting than anything she'd spoken previously. We'd been through tough times before, certainly, but nothing had ever made me feel quite this way. It wasn't the first time we'd battled about something minor, but this seemed different. I wasn't prepared for the rage that erupted in my chest. Perhaps it was because, in the midst of the dispute, I understood she meant it. She wasn't just saying things to hurt me, there was truth behind them. A fact I could no longer ignore. The truth ached. She was not the same lady I had married. "I don't care about those men," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But it broke. I wasn't sure if I was angry or embarrassed about how I handled it. I was tired, mentally fatigued from attempting to cling onto something that seemed to be slipping away. But I wasn't sure how to stop it. The tension in the room grew. My heart began hammering in my chest, like if it were trying to escape. I could feel my pulse in my throat, fingers, and all over my body. I wasn't sure how to calm down. I didn't know how to convince her that I was doing my best. I was trying to be there for her. But nothing was ever sufficient. She did not back down either. In fact, she appeared almost pleased, as if she had won something I hadn't realized I was playing for. "Oh, I know you don't care. But you should. Maybe you'd actually start doing something right for once if you did," she told me. Her comments were chilly, yet with a hint of something deeper behind them. Something I couldn't quite identify. Resentment? Regret? A sense of accomplishment, as if she had finally found the way to break me. I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened suddenly. I wasn't sure if I was trying to save the person I believed I was fighting for or the notion of her. The one I'd been clinging onto for years. The person I thought I knew. She looked away, arms folded, her countenance unreadable. I could feel the distance between us increasing. Not simply in the gap between our bodies, but also in the way she began to stare at me. Her eyes did not soften when they met mine. Like I was no longer the person she cared about. I wanted to shout. To proclaim that I did not deserve this. That I'd been nothing but patient. Nothing except the present. Nothing but here for her. And she didn't notice it. But what good would it do? She was already checked out. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the way she avoided eye contact. It seemed as if she'd already decided. I felt little. Perhaps she was right. Maybe there were plenty more men out there who wanted her and could provide what I couldn't. But I was not going to be the one begging for morsels of affection. So I left. It was not dramatic. There were no slam doors, yelling battles, or emotional goodbyes. I did not even pack a bag. I grabbed my jacket, slung it over my shoulders, and stepped out the door. Perhaps I should have felt more angry, sad, or confused. But all I felt was this strange, numb sensation of clarity. This was not working. She was not working. I wasn't working for her anymore. I wasn't sure where I was headed. I just couldn't stay there. Not now. Not after what she had said. It isn't like I hadn't considered leaving before. But this time, it felt different. This time, there was no going back. I didn't visit a friend's residence. I didn't call anyone to inform them what occurred. I simply drove. The kilometers passing felt like the world was dragging me away from everything. Away from the mess I'd gotten myself into. The silence in the automobile was like a shield. The only sounds were the hum of the tires on the road and the rhythm of my pulse. I ended up at a bar. Alone. It wasn't a classy establishment, but rather a rundown dive with the odor of old beer and fried food. But I didn't care. I ordered a drink, leaned against the counter, and felt the wine burn down my throat, as if it was washing everything away. It was the first time in months that I felt something, anything. The bartender gave me a knowing look. But I didn't care. I did not want anyone to know. I did not wish to explain. Then the door opened. Someone walked in. They grabbed my eye, just a fleeting glance, but I noticed how they stared at me. Not like a broken man. Not like someone who has recently left his wife, but maybe someone they could chat to? Perhaps there is someone they can be around. I did not know. And I didn't care. I knew they didn't see me in the same way she did, and for once, it seemed like it was all I needed. But I was not prepared to make any judgments. Not yet. The night was still early. I just kept drinking, letting the hours pass, feeling a strange sense of liberation develop within me. And then, I heard her name. A voice sounded from behind me. She said she'd leave you? I glanced around expecting to see someone I know. But the man speaking was unfamiliar. Nonetheless, his comments wounded deeply. What the hell? I turned slowly, trying to figure out why this stranger's comments felt like a punch in the gut. He was seated a few stools down, nursing his own drink, his gaze occasionally traveling to mine as he spoke. She said she'd leave you, he continued, more casually this time, as if we were already having the conversation. My heart stutters. My mind raced to catch up and grasp what this guy was expressing. Was he speaking about my wife? How in the hell did he know? Had she told anyone? Had she been informing others? I wasn't sure what to say. I just gazed at him, trying to decide if I should stand up and leave or ask him to elaborate. Who the hell are you? I finally managed to speak, though the words came out colder than I wanted. I was not searching for a confrontation, but I couldn't control myself. This guy knew something, and it made my stomach turn. He smirked, as if he had been waiting for this moment. But instead of providing an explanation, he simply shrugged, as if the solution were obvious. She didn't think you'd leave, he explained. Thought you'd just hang around, put up with whatever she threw at you. My mind was whirling. He had the audacity to talk about my life as if he knew everything. What did he know? What had she told him? I grasped the edge of the bar to keep myself stable. But there was an uncomfortable sensation crawling up my spine. Why are you telling me this? I inquired, my voice a little more calm now, but the anxiety was setting in. My fingers remained tight over my glass, as if it were necessary to keep me grounded. He took a slow sip from his drink and continued to act as if we were having a normal chat. As if he were some sort of confidant. Or something else. He did not appear to be uncomfortable. She came in here a few weeks ago, stated the worker. With someone else. I froze. My mind immediately flashed back to every time I had doubted her faithfulness. Every tiny adjustment in her behavior. Every unusual excuse. What do you mean, with someone else? I inquired, already anticipating the response. The man's eyes shifted to me, this time sharper. As if he knew he had my entire attention. I mean, she came in here with another guy. They were really cozy. She didn't even notice me watching. Guess she thought I was just another regular at the bar. I felt nauseous. I'd never had any tangible evidence of her unfaithfulness before. But hearing that from a stranger, someone who appeared so certain, felt like a brick slamming into my chest. I wanted to yell. At him. To demand information. To get him to return it. But I could not find the words. Instead, I found myself leaning forward, my elbows on the bar, as if being closer would make everything seem less real. You're sure? My voice was lower and almost pleading. I hated myself for asking, but I couldn't resist. I needed to know. The man leaned back and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Oh yeah. She was laughing, touching his arm, getting pretty close. She didn't even care who saw. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, loud and quick. My entire body was on fire. But I didn't feel angry. It was a deep, gnawing ache, as if someone had chiseled out a portion of me that I had no idea existed. I wasn't sure what was worse. The possibility that she had been with someone else. Alternatively, she had not given it a second consideration. I don't think she cares much about you anymore, the man said nonchalantly, as if he were merely giving general advice. He gave me a look that made me feel vulnerable, as if he knew something I didn't want to disclose. I wasn't sure what to say. I could feel myself beginning to unravel. Piece by piece. Everything she had stated? The things I had disregarded or attributed to stress or something else. Was it all leading up to this? Was this the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life, my relationship, fell apart? I gazed at the man, hoping for a response, some kind of closure. But he wasn't offering anything else. He drank his drink, looked aside, and signaled for another. As if this wasn't a significant issue to him. I wanted to shout. But I did not. I left. I scarcely noticed the stroll to my car. The frigid air pierced through me. The engine hums as it starts up. It seemed like everything had changed in an instant. Like the world was no longer a place where I could simply glide along thinking everything was all right. As I traveled into the night, my mind was racing with ideas and possibilities. I wasn't sure where I was headed anymore. I wasn't sure if I was escaping from her, or simply attempting to escape the sense of betrayal that had settled into my bones. I eventually pulled into a parking lot. One I did not recognize. The silence of the night surrounded me. The only sound was the gentle hum of the car's engine. I looked out the window, attempting to make sense of what had just occurred. But something else was nagging at me now. Something I didn't consider in the excitement of the moment. What if I wasn't the only person who had left? What if she were waiting for me to leave, so she could finally make her own decisions? I wasn't certain I wanted to find out. But I knew I needed to. I spent the next 3 days in a blur, mostly driving around, trying to clear my mind. But the ideas did not stop. Every street reminded me of her. Of everything we had built. And everything was crumbling apart. My phone rang several times, but I didn't have the energy to respond. I did not want to hear from her. Not yet. Not while everything seemed so raw. Then came the message. A basic text. Nevertheless, it felt like a bomb exploded in my lap. We need to talk. I looked at the text on the screen. My hand shook slightly as I read them repeatedly. I wasn't sure what she would say. But I could feel the tempest brewing inside me again. I did not want to chat. Not yet. Not while things remained so ambiguous. But I could not ignore it. I needed to know where we stood. I responded simply. I will be there. When I arrived at the residence, it was really silent. The front door was slightly ajar. The silence inside felt almost ominous. It was too vacant. Too still. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded together. She seemed smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, her eyes were a jumble of things. Guilt, perhaps. Or fear. I could not tell. There was also something else there. Something I couldn't quite identify. She didn't look at me the same way she had previously. Not the way I was used to seeing her. Her glance was not warm, no connection. I didn't know where else to start, she explained, breaking the stillness. Her voice was soft yet steady. I owe you an explanation. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It felt thick. You owe me more than that. The words came out sharper than I intended. But I didn't care. I needed answers. I wanted something to make sense of this chaos. She did not respond to the severity of my tone. Instead, she groaned and looked down at her hands. I never meant for things to get this bad. But things weren't right, were they? I didn't know how to fix it, and maybe I wasn't even trying anymore. I simply stared at her, my thoughts reeling. She was not even trying. That is what it boiled down to. I had overlooked all those subtle signs. All those occasions when I should have asked inquiries. I'd been too busy pretending that everything could be mended. That we could return to the way things used to be. She took a deep breath. For a brief moment, I thought she may cry. However, she didn't. Instead, she proceeded. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I pushed you far enough, you'd be the one to walk away. It would have been easier that way, right? But you didn't. You stuck around. And I kept pushing. And then, When I met someone else? She paused. I don't know. It felt like I was already done before it even started. My brain was spinning. Someone else. The word struck me harder than expected. It wasn't only the argument. Or her snarky remarks. It wasn't only that she appeared distant and frigid. She'd actually been with someone. What the hell are you talking about? I eventually choked out. My hands were clenched, but I was scarcely conscious of them. You think you can just go out and do whatever you want and I wouldn't notice? I didn't believe I was living in a fiction. But perhaps I was? Perhaps she was. She looked up at me, her eyes full of something, regret. I never wanted to hurt you, but I wasn't happy. I couldn't tell you that. I didn't know how. The silence stretched between us. A chasm that seemed impossible to cross. All these years. All of the moments we had shared. So here we were. Sitting in the kitchen. Strangers. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. So what now? You just expect me to walk back into this like nothing happened? I shook my head, my frustration finally spilling out. You think I just forget? That I let you shut me out like that and then come back? I'm sorry, she whispered. Her face wrinkled, but she did not respond. Instead, she looked away, as if she couldn't take the weight of my words. I stepped back and ran my hand through my hair. Attempting to think. Attempting to breathe. You were right about one thing, I told you. My voice was shaking now, even though I fought to keep it steady. I did leave. You wanted me to go? And I did. But not for the reasons you think. She blinked, a scowl forming on her forehead. What do you mean? I felt a rush of bitter laughter rise in my chest. But I did not let it out. Not yet. I left because I finally saw it. I saw that you don't see me anymore. I'm just someone you're stuck with. Someone who will always be here, no matter how much you push. You made me feel small. And then you decided it wasn't enough. So you found someone else. Her voice was scarcely audible now. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake. An error. I scoffed as the ache in my chest made it difficult to breathe. You don't just make a mistake like that. You make choices. You make decisions. And you chose him. The hush that followed was smothering. Neither of us knew what to say next, because the truth came out. It was in the air, heavy and obvious. She'd betrayed me. And I had to make a decision. Can I live with that? Could I even attempt to restore what we had? Or was it simply too far gone? I turned towards the door. My body felt weary. My heart was broken. But something inside me stood taller than it has in months. I can't do this anymore, I murmured quietly. I'm done. I walked out the door without saying another word. I did not glance back. And as I drove away, the weight on my chest gradually lifted, little by little. The route ahead was unclear. It was not easy. For the first time in a long while, I was making my own decision. And maybe, that was all I needed to do. I spent 2 years in prison for my sister, but upon release, my family coldly rejected me, treating me as worthless. Get out! Get out! Get out! Seamus was furious, grabbing my collar and attempting to haul me outside. Don't touch me. I forcefully shrugged off his grasp, forcing him to stumble and almost collapse. Smack! Melanie walked forward without saying anything and slapped me hard across the face. Jonathan, you're no longer the lobby manager making tens of thousands of dollars a month. You are no longer a valuable individual. Did you really expect us to put up with you? She yelled down the hallway. Security. Where is security? When the security guards heard this, they raced over. Melanie pointed at me and yelled at the security officers. How can you allow anyone in here? Get this beggar out of here now. The chief of security approached Melanie and kindly said, Ma'am, what is the problem? Melanie pointed at me again. This man is a penniless beggar attempting to scam a meal here. Get him out. The security chief stared at me coldly and said, Sir, please leave. I normally kept a quiet profile, rarely revealing my role as hotel owner. Even though I lived and ate here, only high management knew who I was. When I saw the head of security trying to toss me out so rapidly, I fixed him with a harsh look and asked, Is this how you handle situations? Don't you understand the hotel's policies? We should not judge anyone based on their appearance or offend any guest. The security chief's eyes flickered with apprehension. He gazed at me uncomfortably, not daring to say anything. When Seamus saw this, he grew anxious. Don't let him trick you, he's simply a broke ex-con. Throw him out. Sorry, sir. We don't eject any guests without a reason, The security chief strongly declined Seamus' request. This is ridiculous. So, what are you security men doing? Are you terrified of him after only a few words? Gavin shouted at the guards before returning his gaze to me. Jonathan, I don't believe you can bluff your way out of this. I know the hotel management. One call from me and you're out. With that, he took out his phone and called. Mr. Feldman, it's Gavin, I'm busy. The call ended abruptly with a frigid response, leaving Gavin standing awkwardly holding his phone. I scoffed and calmly asked, You want to talk with Mr. Feldman? Allow me to help you. I got out my phone and dialed Mr. Feldman. Come to private room 777 within 3 minutes. Are you out of your mind, Jonathan? You are a broke ex-con. Do not claim to be someone important here. We know what kind of person you are. Is there any reason to put on this act? Gavin scoffed at me. The other relatives looked at me like I was a clown, with derision and disgust on their faces. Melanie wiped the sweat from her brow and whispered, embarrassed. This is so humiliating. How did I raise my son like this? James also appeared frustrated. Jonathan, please leave. Stop pretending. You are making a fool of yourself and your family. Exactly? Some poor folks have lost their minds and created delusions. Gavin scoffed. He couldn't even get Mr. Feldman here. Do you think you can? That's ridiculous, Seamus hissed, his tone full of scorn. He glanced at me as if simply acknowledging my presence was beneath him. But, just as he finished speaking, a middle-aged woman in a suit appeared by our side. I took the fall for my sister and served 2 years in prison. But when I got out, my sister and brother-in-law were concerned that I would compete for the property and assist my parents in attempting to push me out of the house. 2 years ago, Joanna and Seamus were speeding and traveling in the wrong direction with my car when they collided and murdered someone. My folks approached me quickly. They claimed Joanna had a weak heart but had ultimately managed to marry. If she went to prison, not only would she lose her marriage, but her life may be jeopardized. They cried and asked me to accept the blame for her. They assured me that the entire family would handsomely reward me once I was out. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I loved my parents and genuinely cared for my sister. I made personal sacrifices for her, including going to prison, selling my car, depleting my money, losing my job, paying the compensation, and enduring all of the insults. But I never anticipated my heartfelt sacrifice to be met with such treachery and scorn. I do not comprehend. Isn't blood meant to be thicker than water? Why does family loyalty wane in the face of personal gain? Joanna's expression darkened with disdain when she heard my words. She responded, I've already thanked you for taking the fall. What else do you want from me? This house is now in my name, and Seamus and I are expecting a kid in a few months. There isn't enough room. You have to relocate. We cannot afford to maintain an idler. In her opinion, 2 years in prison was barely worth one thank you. Asking for more made me appear unreasonable. Melanie interjected, Nino, don't you understand? A man's fate is to marry and provide for his family rather than to rely on them. We hope to marry you off to a respectable woman and get some security. However, as an ex-convict, no one will want you. Letting you stay here is already something we're thinking about for nostalgic reasons. Seamus said. Exactly. You've been in prison, so you'll remain impoverished indefinitely. If we let you stay, you'll drain us dry. He warned, his tone harsh. James extinguished his cigarette and replied coldly. Jonathan, you've grown up now. It's time you recognize the value of giving to the family rather than making problems. Each of their words was like a sharp razor cutting my heart. Despite my intense disappointment, my eyes welled up. I stared at them and exclaimed, hoarsely, no wonder you never paid me a visit during my 2 years in prison. I assumed you were just too busy to see me. But now I realize, you only regarded me as a moneymaker. You kicked me out without hesitation when I couldn't make money anymore. I cocked my head back, trying to keep back tears. Then I inquired. So you're all determined to kick me out today? Yes, Seamus responded without hesitation. Melanie, Joanna, and James all appeared determined. Obviously, there was no space for negotiating. I saw no affection in their eyes. I nodded, my heart devastated. Fine. As you wish. We're done starting today. And I hope you don't regret it. Finally, I saw them for what they were. These folks, who I longed for during my 2 years in prison, did not deserve my sacrifices. However, the $100 million I had intended to split with them would now remain with me. I walked out the door without saying anything else and did not glance back. Behind the door, I heard Seamus' furious roar. You think too highly of yourself. What's there to lose by cutting connections with a broke ex-convict like you? If we let you stay here and mooch off us, we'll truly regret it. After leaving that callous home, I explored the streets alone for quite some time before finding a hotel to stay at. Lying on the bed, I gazed at the 9-figure number in my bank account, lost in thought. I used to believe I grew up in a pretty happy family. When I was having challenges at work, my father patiently comforted and guided me. When I worked late at the office, my mother would bring me my favorite supper. When it rained, my sister would come and pick me up at work. I felt like the family's most cherished young prince. I was always perplexed when I saw tales online about parents preferring daughters over sons. How can such families exist? How could they not love their sons? But now I understand that dreadful sensation of helplessness and disappointment. I realized I had always been a member of such a family. All of the love I'd felt was predicated on my usefulness to them. I was more of an investment. Their love was the price, and my money was the reward. As a result, the gifts of fate had always come at a hidden cost. They smiled warmly when I told them I could generate money while also providing a nice living for everyone. But now they saw me as an ex-convict who couldn't find work and had no money or value. Their love had evaporated entirely. Little did they know, this ex-con had $100 million in his account. I couldn't help but be a little excited, wondering how they'd react if the son they loathed the most reached the pinnacle of success one day. The next day, I checked into a hotel in the city center. This wasn't just any hotel, it was a high-end, vast operation that offered dining, housing, banquets, and even business services. It had 8 levels and occupied the entire building. The location, surroundings, and foot traffic were all great. Before going to prison, I worked as a hotel lobby manager. Naturally, I wanted to return to my previous profession. Only this time, instead of being a manager, I'm the owner. I spent several hours negotiating with the hotel's owner before buying it from her. That same day, I assumed management responsibility. From then on, I lived and ate at the hotel, utilizing every opportunity to study and build new management and operational tactics. Under my direction, the hotel's business grew to the point that reservations were nearly impossible to come by. I quickly became a legitimately affluent man in the city. 6 months later, while inspecting the dining department, I overheard Joanna talking in a secluded area. "This motel is quite popular. I had to plan my daughter's 1-month birthday party 2 months in advance simply to get a table. I've heard that only the crème de la crème may dine here. Joanna, you made it, bringing us to such a luxurious location." I stopped in place when I discovered Joanna had invited our parents and a large group of relatives to this private room to celebrate her newborn daughter's 1-month birthday. Melanie was showing off by filming videos on her phone. My face appeared in the shot as her camera panned to the door. "Jonathan! What are you doing here?" Melanie set down her phone and frowned at me. When they heard this, everyone in the room turned to face me, who was standing in the doorway. "Jonathan, do you have no shame? You knew we were hosting a banquet here today and followed us only to get some food." Seamus raced up and chastised me like I was the plague. "Who said I was here to scrounge for food?" I responded calmly. "What are you here for, if not to beg? This is a high-end establishment exclusively for the privileged. If you're hungry, search through the rubbish outside." "That's where you belong," she snarled, crossing her arms and staring at me with disgust. The other family frowned and glared at me, disgusted, as if I were an unpleasant fly. Joanna also spoke up, apparently unhappy. "Jonathan, when you stated you wanted to cut connections with us, I believed you had some fortitude. But now you've resorted to following us for a free supper. It's just horrible." Before I could react, James joined in. "Jonathan, I educated you at a young age to be self-sufficient and dignified. Have you forgotten? How could you give up your pride for a meal?" I stared at them and scoffed. "It's only a meal. It does not matter to me. You are really something, aren't you? Sour grapes. As if an impoverished ex-con like you could ever afford a lunch here. Even if you've worked your entire life," Seamus sneered.